the Mercedes can be brought back to the garage, but I think once it is on the public roads, they'll discover it's going to be irreparable. Only caught a couple of glimpses of that in the darkness as to how much damage had been done, but massive on the front right corner, I would say. So we're homing in on another hour being completed. 8:30 is just 2 minutes away, and that will put 5 hours of the 48th edition of the 24 hours into the books. And write this one down then. Big direction change. Maxi Goertz in car number 9 will shortly, or now he's confirmed as the new race leader as he streamed across the line, and he enjoys a 23.1 second advantage. So it's gone from that minute we were talking about to now become 20 seconds and one totally different car, and Goertz promoted to the race lead.
Well, I did say those Audis were sitting there, didn't I? So we had 2 Mercedes and 3, well, at one point we had 4 Audis sitting behind now. One of those Mercedes, and who'd have thought that, of that car, that Metzger would have an issue, that somebody of his calibre, whatever, something's put a bit of fluid there. Very much to slow down the cars. That's, oh, how much opposite sector got? That's a lot of damage to the front end of that number 4.
Yes, it is.
GT3 AMG. That was a big old impact. I say it was just literally the definition of a tank slapper. It just twitched one way, caught it, and it just fired it off to the right, and that was it. Job done, straight into the barriers.
So Maro Engel may well have put the helmet on in readiness to change the driver in the 6, that's in the 4 rather. That's just not going to be possible, and he will now turn his attention to the number 6 car instead, that he is entered in with Dirk Muller, Dominic Baumann and Patrick Assenheimer in the number 6 machine, which is also a full pro entry, started by Patrick Assenheimer, and it's down in 9th place with Don Baumann currently doing the driving. Very, very slow indeed for Sheldon van der Linde in the number 42 Schnitzer BMW as he works his way past the almost aircraft accident for the Mercedes, the number 4 car, and he is in a queue that involves the number 11 Iron Force Audi. Yes, it is. And who's that being driven by at the moment? Well, it's not featuring in the top 20. I remember that car was started by Pierre Caffer, just about the fastest driver in that combination. And the Iron Force Racing car is currently has Jean-Eric Schluten at the wheel. They run in SP9 as well. But Manuel Metzger coming through Schwabenschwanz, the Kleiner carousel, has the boards left and right displayed, but it's just a big wiggle out of nowhere, losing grip, turning right and into the barrier, and then Porsche as well right behind involved, which we were trying to still identify. I still think that's the 35 car that has had a delay, and yeah, the SP Pro machine has just come into the pits as well with a slow lap, a 13:36, which would kind of tally. If it was the 35, that car is no longer at the accident scene. So yeah, it was the 35. It's the car that is branded as the 911 GT3 Cup MR for Rosenberg. And Metzger heading then, you can hear his V8 in the background through the Kleiner carousel, and it snaps one way then the other, can't catch it, and into the barriers. Peter Snowden will join us a little bit later on. He's stepping away now here on RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. Alex Brundle joining me once again, and maybe seeing that incident for the first time. Alex, how do you read it?
Oh, Peter does, as he left the box there, just pointed out the oil flags either side, and you gotta wonder if there was something down on the circuit there. I have had a couple of looks at that incident, was trying to work out if the Porsche behind had got involved with Metzger, but certainly from the behaviour of the car, it doesn't seem that way. It looks like synchronised spinning to me.
Maybe, and he'd overtaken the 35 really just on the exit of Flansgarten and had cleared him, as you would expect for an SP9 car overtaking the SP Pro machine. And then it was like Rosenberg went off in sympathy, as you said, synchronised spinning, also probably road partially blocked with a sideways Mercedes in front of you, and he's clanged the barrier more in avoidance than actual contact. But with limited ways of calling that right now, because it's basically all from the driver's viewpoint, and namely Metzger's viewpoint too. So downhearted, Manuel Metzger, stranded out at the car there. And as I said, because Mauro Engel's been entered into 2 cars, he now switches entirely to the number 6 machine and this Auto Arena car.
All right for some, isn't it?
Isn't it just? Yeah.
Into the other car. Interesting phase of the race for tyres. Anyone who hung on to a treaded set will be obviously helped by the rain again. You did see a fair few cars jumping over to the slick tyre. It is, you really have to stick with it if you end up out on the wrong tyre, almost bound at some point to be on the wrong tyre throughout a changeable conditioned 24-hour race like this one. As we see the number 6 car of Dominic Baumann, if indeed he did stay inside that car.
Well, I think with Engel with his helmet on, he was raring to go, and he just wants a car to drive now.
Yeah,
so
Engel's out.
There you go. Yeah, so he'll pop back into difficult to judge, but somewhere in and around the bottom of the top 10, maybe the early teens, showing 13th at the moment, but we'll allow the timing streak to shake out a little bit. Dries Van Tor battling with one of the GT-tired Golfs on the run up towards the rather proper carousel, the Caracciolo version. And he'll hit the concrete in a moment. Very misty indeed in this part of the racetrack.
In the drier conditions, those Audis really took off, didn't they? Dries Van Tor homing in on the Mercedes out front. Let's see how they get on now. It's a little wetter again. 28 seconds is the interval back to Dries Van Tor, and then Van der Linde, quite a way back now, isn't he? Behind Dries.
Yeah. But it might become a bit of a numbers game here, because although Audi aren't leading the race, they are 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, and they can afford for 1 or 2 to be prone by incident and still be in a decent position. But it depends, which of the customer arms is your favourite. Phoenix Racing running the number 1, Land Motorsport with the number 29, and you've got the 3 of Christopher Haase and another Phoenix car, Kim Louis Schramm, sitting there in 5th place. Best BMW now up to 6th. And Porsches 7th, 8th and 9th for KCMG, 2 of them. They are 7th and 9th, and the meat in the sandwich is Frickadelli Racing Team.
Old school endurance race then, potentially, as you say. How many of them just purely make it to the end?
Well, yeah.
It's been an absolutely brutal event so far, hasn't it? Not even close to halfway through this one. No. And we've already had 2 dumps of rain, several different changes of tyres, and a leader off in the wall. Astra's still there though.
Good stuff.
I'm gonna keep tabs on that guy, I think, all the way through this race.
I like it.
I love it.
We've actually got a couple of Opel Astras in the race. There's one in V2T, that's the OPC version, and then there's a Cup car out there as well that runs in SP3T. 4th place for the SP3T car, the number 90, and V2T, the Eichhorn car is 3rd. So podiums in the offing, but they'd really like to be leading their classes individually. Now heading into the crash site for Manuel Metzger. Beg pardon, yes, that was the scene. We've still got 2 batches of Code 60 out on track, one being brought out by the Renault Clio, car 123, down at Exmuller and Breitscheid. So I just wonder whether 1 or 2 teams, even though they're not very far into their current stint, might choose to bring a car in for some fuel here, because you're going to lose far less time than you would be if it was a fully green racetrack.
You generally need a relatively big full course, a relatively big slow zone for it to be worth your while. Obviously the fuel stops are pretty long, so as a percentage, if you imagine it as a percentage component of the fuel stop, the period on track is not as big. Can you see what I mean?
Yeah. But it's dictated by how many laps you've done, isn't it?
Certainly is. Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get a car in and out and gain a bit of track position, we did see a bit of play for that at the start with some short pit stops, which I think is how we ended up a bit out of sequence with the Audis.
I tell you, Maxi Gertz has only done 5 laps and he was in, and Nico Muller in the number 1 car was in as well, and
could well be a conditional change also.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, certainly when those slow zones are out on circuit, can be the time to bring the car in and get some servicing done.
So driver change in the 1 car. Nico Muller He'd done 8 laps, he then did a 5-lap stint, and he's handing over to Dries van Toor now in the number 1. There's a couple of Belgians in that car, the other being Frederik Verweij. You've got the Swiss Nico Muller in, and Frank Stippler named against that car as well, although Frank's not done any driving in the 1. It's been all in the 5 to this point. Just a mass of headlights heading down towards turn 1. I've no clue how many cars are involved there, but that is sometimes the blinding factor that you get in your rear view mirrors. You'll know all about that, Alex.
The GT3 cars have barely any limitation on light, and unlike, for example, an LMP1 car, there's also no limitation on strobe of flash or frequency of flash. So particularly the Manthey cars burn the paint off the rear bodywork as they come up behind you, and it all goes a little bit 90s disco as they turn up as well. So you have to be a bit careful with that. Certainly you do know when one of the Manthey cars is up behind you, and it almost becomes I suspect this is the strategy, actually. It always becomes so uncomfortable to have them behind you, you get out of the way, just because you just want this massive ball of flashing light to go away from your rear bumper. No accident. I would expect that those cars are painted in such bright colours as well to move them through the traffic. Again, strategic, important for all of the traffic to see you coming.
And also, not necessarily in this level of light, but you do get the blue flashing light as well if you're one of the quick cars. One of such is in the gravel, though, it appears.
He's flashed all the way into the gravel. Looks like the exit of turn 1, which is always uber slippery in this kind of wet condition. Patrick Kolb is that an SP? No, it's not. It's an SP9 car, the 25 car. And where was he? Running in 19th position at the moment. He's just locked it and dropped it. Well, he went and locked it, anti-lock braking systems, but effectively the same concept. He's run completely out of braking ability down there.
Yeah, that's one of the Pro-Am cars in SP9, and he shares that car with Marco Holzer, who did plenty of mileage early on in the race.
Gets himself much too deep. Out onto the green AstroTurf on the left-hand side there, and it's never going to stop from there. I have seen the fastest competitors braking all the way down the inside there, because the amount of rubber in that braking zone in normal conditions is absolutely massive, and then obviously that prevents there being grip on the right line, the correct dry line of the circuit in wet conditions. So it's one of the slipperiest places on the racetrack. When it's wet, I'll give him that.
Well, Patrick, pretty inexperienced, only into his 2nd year of motor racing, and it's all been done on the Nurburgring Nordschleife, whether that be in VLN in 2019, when he raced an SP7 Uber Motorsport Porsche. Actually did the 24 hours last year as well, and they finished 25th overall, I think I'm right in saying, and has done some NLS racing as well with the same team, but otherwise haven't got any record of him racing anywhere else, so knows this track pretty well. Meanwhile, Lars Kern heading down the long straight of the Dottinger Höhe in 8th place for Fricadelli, and there's a lot of spray hanging in the air. Although he's not got a car immediately in front of him, the tail lights of a couple he is getting closer and closer to. He's fainting out of the throttle there to head underneath the Bilstein Bridge, and Antonius Bucher, the left-hand king, before you then properly stamp on the anchors to scrub all the speed off in time for Tiergarten, although there's probably chance just about to get ahead of that BMW M2. There was.
Look at the movement on the steering wheel, the way he's turning with those slight movements. It just indicates the level of tension he's feeling as he drives that car through that extremely fast section at the end of the lap. Very few cars out there that will be flat out in the wet under the Bilstein Bridge, and very few drivers, even for the ones that could be flat, that will be holding them there, because there are a lot of changes of surface down there. The cars can really move about incredibly nastily. Looks like we've got a code 120 at least for that issue down at the first corner.
And he was diving by I thought that was the 65, so that'll be the other Huber Motorsport car from SP7, the car for Florian Spengler and Hans Wehrmann, along with Johannes Stengel and Philipp Neufer. So 65 passing the stranded Uber Motorsport SP9 entry in the gravel.
Interestingly, looks like Gotts and Van Thor out front have been nailed by a slow zone which Van der Linde and Haas have got away with.
Oh, right.
Because they took the pair 29 and 3, Van der Linde and Haas took 2 minutes out of both Gotts and Van Thor that time around, didn't they? 12 to play 10s at the front, and that's just the sort of thing. So now the gap back to Van der Linde from Van Thor, the one Audi plays with 29, only a minute. Just when you think you're out of it, boom, 2 minutes up the road, just like that. Welcome to the Nurburgring 24 hours.
Just a bit, and then some. Just to give you an idea of where the cars are on the track, Gertz is somewhere in the 40-odd second 6th sector, and therefore will have encountered the slow zone. Well, that's on the previous lap, though, isn't it? So there's been a code 60 or a slow zone in place, and was cleared before those cars reached it. I'm just trying to work out which that was, because according to my tracker, they're both still slow. What they've done is they've raised the speed limit at Expuller from 60 to 120. So all of a sudden you can go through there, still speed limited, but a little bit faster. And maybe that does account for the 2 minutes odd that both Van der Linde and Haase and everybody else behind, Tram in the 5 Phoenix car and Yellerly in the Rover Racing BMW.
It's literally only the 2 leaders who've been caught out.
Massively costly for Maximilian Gertz and Van Tor. But I'm also thinking those are the 2 cars that pitted. So is it the pit stop that's cost them time? Yes. So Gertz did a 5-lapper, Nico Muller did a 5-lapper, and as I said, there was that driver change between Muller and Dries Van Tor, wasn't there? There you go. It's a task to stay on top of everything that's going on right now.
Can very well happen though if the field are running through the various slow zones, and that is the order of gap that you can win and lose out on through the different slow zones if one is just raised. Let's look at Lars Kern again.
He was being overtaken by a KCMG Porsche, the 18 car of Earl Bamber to his outside.
That's the order of difference between your absolute top pro. Look at Bamber just taking off. Big old slide as well for Kern. And he's not happy in that, is he?
No. And we spotted this, earlier on in the day in warm-up. Lars Kern looked to have a massive amount of understeer from that car. It just wasn't responding at all. He needed sort of 3 goes at getting the car into some of the tighter corners. And I don't think they've been able to improve the setup for that car for Lars Kern. So yes, I agree with, that's the supreme talent from Earl Bamber, but I think KCMG are much closer to the mark setup-wise as well.
You can always see when a driver is absolutely happy with the setup of a car, particularly a GT car on a difficult circuit, because turning happens once, not 6 times.
Precisely.
Just boom, straight in, absolute stability from the rear. Especially here where very much the technique is to roll speed into the corner and allow the front end of the car almost to slow the car down as you go in and drive that kind of nice sweeping GT line and carry the speed. And you really can't get away with poking away at the steering wheel too much.
Yeah, Nick and I spotted in warm-up that once Lars got up to speed and the aero takes effect over that Porsche, so through Klostertal and Kesselchen, he was all right, but it's the slower speed stuff where you're relying on the mechanical grip, and we were talking about tyres in our last stint as well. And for whatever reason, he's not able to make the front tyres work, and he can't get the required rotation on the 31 car. So they're going to be chasing that setup, probably race long, dare I say it. And when you consider they are battling that, 10th place is pretty good at the moment. That's actually in the better conditions. It's the car that holds the fastest lap of the race, though, as well, at 9:12.4. So not liking the wet weather, but Fricadelli shouldn't be discounted this early on. 18 3/4 hours to go.
Can often be the case. You've got to wonder if he's still... have they made a pit stop since that? Yes, they will have done. And made a pit stop since that last race. So I wouldn't say that Kern will be out there on the incorrect tyre. He'll just be a little bit unhappy with the way the car is handling.
Yeah.
Potentially still struggling in that.
And I should make the point, it wasn't Kern that did the fastest lap. It was Mathieu Jaminet, who is on average lap times quicker, quite a bit. although Lars Kern does do quite a bit of development work for Porsche, namely around the Nordschleife, so is a venue specialist. Sheldon van der Linde, meanwhile, 42. That's the BMW from Schnitzer, 9th place, and he's literally right behind Earl Bamber. So Bamber's got ahead of Kern, he's just got ahead of van der Linde as well, but now there's a bit of traffic up ahead, and Bamber can't clear it, so the BMW's right with him again.
So caught up behind same class traffic. Exactly. It's very, very tight. Even I've done this race and I can't tell you where they are. Oh, they're just going into the second part of... still can't tell you where they are. Just heading down through the first part, flip flaps, aren't they? And yes. Down and then down the hill. This is a brilliant battle.
So very, very wide indeed for Earl Bamber. He's hunting the wetter part of the circuit, or maybe where the rain is still in place. This is the run up to the carousel, isn't it? Yeah. Carousel. I wonder whether it was close to tar, but they weren't quite going fast enough, or fast enough, but it's because they had a load of traffic to deal with. That's a really quick section, particularly in drier conditions. Slower car, virtually nose to tail. Sheldon van der Linde giving him the hurry up, but now that's provided the gap that Earl Bamber wanted.
Look at the nature and the size of the gap that you lose behind a slow piece of traffic when you're following them through the carousel. They head up down towards Hoag, the highest part of the circuit, up at the top of the hill. And there'll be a lot of work to do through Wipperman and Brunchen to try to gather that gap back up. He certainly looks to have slightly the pace over Bamber, doesn't he, at the moment? We'll see what van der Linde can do. That's the closest battle on the racetrack right now. From one van der Linde placing the pressure, another van der Linde slightly under pressure a bit further up, with Hasse only 11 seconds back from him in the fight for third. Would probably be the second closest battle in the top 10.
Yeah, and Haase found something like 3 seconds on in the previous lap, so that gap is condensing, I agree. 11 seconds or so, and through the next split we'll get a better feel for things. Luca Engstler, meanwhile, in the Hyundai Motorsport N Run i30, is running in the TCR class, and doesn't lead it because that's Guerrieri's Honda Civic that is first, and car 170, 30th overall, which is really going some for the TCR class. Manuel Lauk second in the Hyundai Veloster, and third position now for the Bonk Motorsport Audi. So last time I checked, Engstler was doing all right and in third place, but he's just been overtaken by the Audi RS3 of Bonk Motorsport.
Two most highly numbered cars in the race, 830 and 831, those two Hyundai TCR cars, ever outperforming their class. As we follow him then down to the fast chicane on the Grand Prix loop, and another run round the northern loop for him. Look at it moving around over the rear tyre. Here's the 830, that's the other one.
Yeah, so that's the... Yes, the Engstler car is the i30, and then the Veloster's the sister machine, but Hyundai, very much a Korean brand, but this arm that prepares the cars based in Germany, and I think they deliberately turn up with two different models to show how good they both are around the Nordschleife. The slow zone and the speed limits at Exmuller have cleared. That happened about 5 minutes ago, so the recovery of Renault Clio number 1, 2, 3 is complete. And the whole of the northern section of the Nordschleife is back to racing speed.
They're still tidying up the Mercedes issue in Spaldingswans, I think, no?
They are, yeah, but the earlier issue at Breitscheid one has gone. But yeah, I mean, there's a mass of code 60s still at Spaldingswans. I think that's probably down to the wreck of the Armco barrier after Manuel Metzger hit it very, very hard indeed. The car will be long gone. But Lars Kern is in the queue, leading into the Kleine Carousel. He's not allowed to overtake the 154 BMW until now, and they're out of it. And this will be the double right-hander onto the Dottinger Hohe. So Galgen Kopp, and now a steady stream of tail lights that he will draw ever closer to, as cars from all sorts of different classes were not permitted to overtake for a fairly long section, but you can now, and a big old gaggle about to arrive at the end into Tiergarten.
And this is the moment you're listening, you're watching, you're looking for any trace of a flashing red light in the darkness, because you'll be following what you think is a car delivering a completely normal speed, and then a car in a much, much lower class will whiz over your right shoulder, and I better be looking out for a few more of those. You really have to, the concentration required to make sure that you're not just going to cream into the back of a car which is stopped as well. Always a terrifying moment. We have seen that down the dotting to hurt. You're looking out also for any kind of slow zone or code 60, because there is a code 60 zone on the dotty, so you have to make sure that you're not just going to go flat out into a gaggle of cars all doing 60 kph. It can be it's a pretty extreme experience, to be honest. Yeah, and it very easy to have the classic freeway motorway style accident where those immediately behind can see it and can react, but those that are unsighted just don't have the opportunity. And I suggest you revisit the Mugello Grand Prix this year, the Tuscan Grand Prix, to see exactly how restarts can develop that, but also in this type of racing, when you're going from racing speed down into a speed restricted area. Sheldon van der Linde at the wheel of the Schnitzer BMW, and Elbhammer still can't shake him. Despite his best efforts, flashing of the lights for another Porsche, but that might well have been one of the alternatively fueled cars. It was a cup car anyway, and they made quick work of that. That's what I mean about it being very 80s rave when they hit the flash button. Look how aggressive it is. He's quicker than him, isn't he, van der Linde? Much, because lost about 10 seconds through that little bit of traffic, and he's just zoomed straight back up to the gearbox of Elbhammer. So you would imagine that he's going to be in a position to make that overtake relatively soon. So I think he just done it. Actually, I think he's just done it. Just peering down at pit stop strategy and missed the overtake. Sheldon van der Linde, yes, on the inside of that connecting road, effectively between the Grand Prix lap and the Nordschleife and onto the Hatzenbach. Yes, Sheldon van der Linde now has dispatched Elbhammer. I didn't think that was going to happen, to be honest, because Bamber had gone in front of him, and I saw nothing other than really the Kiwi stretching away, but wasn't able to do it. And Sheldon van der Linde of South Africa reverses the fortunes. BMW back ahead of Porsche. Good run through the really fast right-hand kink, and actually did it into the chicane, didn't he? He's got much more grip, hasn't he, for whatever reason. And looking happy in that. Very deep braking down into the chicane for van der Linde. A lot of belief. You can cut across the second part there, but it's not very friendly on the apex, so you can try and get the move done, if at all possible, on the way in. Here's the leader then, making his way past GT4 Porsches like they don't exist through the second part of Brunchen. And you head all the way down through this bank section, coming out Whipperman actually, sorry, this is the Brunchen zone. Normally spectators on the bank on the left hand side, but not this year. Look how dark it is. Normally a big Larry party out there, and which brightens up the apexes of Brunchen beautifully. A lot of the drivers commenting on the lack of spectators, leading to a lack of light. A bit of a fog bank as he apexes over the ice curve. Well, yes, because it generates its own, artificial light, doesn't it? Whether it's campfires, whether it's the lights on the campsite illuminating the bars and the discos that are happening there. And I suppose you can make those reference points then, as well as to where you are on the track, your turning points, your clipping points. And there is a distinct lack of those clearly this year. And it's just complete darkness in places. You do not want that on the approach to Brunchen. As you go through kind of the outside of Schwalbensvans, there's something out of Mad Max normally built there on the left-hand side, and they are flat out until 4 AM when they all go to sleep. Okay. And all of a sudden the apex of Schwalbensvans becomes a lot harder to find. You're willing them to party almost as you go through there. You're like throwing them a bottle of vodka over the
Keep
fence
it going,
and get on with
please.
it. Exactly.
Yeah. You're doing an all-nighter, why can't they?
Exactly. Just through that section, Gotts is moving through now on his way down to the small carousel. Let's see how they're getting on with clearing up the barrier. And still looking relatively busy down there, isn't it? There's that barrier on the left-hand side. And is that the Porsche? Is that the car still down there, isn't it, actually?
May well be. I'm still astounded by the HGV convoy, pretty much, which is thundering its way on the left-hand side of the circuit to do the necessary repairs. Armco panels and then struts in behind that provide the support. I mean, Armco barrier is designed obviously to cushion the blow from a big accident, but really it's designed to be hit once and then immediately replaced, and that's what the technicians and the maintenance crews have to do here, sometimes in the dead of night, whilst there's a motor race going on around them.
Expensive, the barrier here at the Nurburgring. I mean, ideally, really the primary job of the barrier is to stop cars going into the crowd. That's what it does firstly. It's a protection for the crowd as opposed to the competitor. Anything beyond that is a nicety, really. I mean, ideally, of course, you would have cars spinning off into an infinite void of nothingness, but of course then nobody would be able to see the race cars. So it's the installation of the crowd in normal times which would provide the necessity for a barrier. But as you say, Johnny, here they have Armco all the way around the circuit, which is designed and often needs to be replaced if hit. Costs you a significant amount of money, by the way, if you crash your car here.
If you're in a road car and you've paid for a lap and you clean a bit of Armco out, the bill is sent straight to your door.
Yeah,
I know.
You'll be repairing both things, and very few insurance companies will cover you to fix any Nurburgring barrier as well. So that's something you need to be thinking about if you fancy a few laps around the ring after the race. Wouldn't go in the dark in the rain if I were you.
No, leave that to the professionals, and even those guys sometimes susceptible to the...
Porsche is not starting up very well, is it?
Is that the 44? Yes, it is, that Muller brought in. That'll be Sven Muller, who, the last time I checked, was down to be driving both cars, very similar to Maro Engel, in the 4 and the 6 machines. He's had to switch from one to the other, as we reported a moment or two ago, because of Manuel Metzger's incident.
He had power, but it just wasn't cranking. Very interesting.
And yeah, Sven Muller and Klaus Bachler doubling up between both the Falken Motorsport Porsches. Flatbed lorry leaving the Kleiner Carousel again, and that might be the vehicle on scene now to finally recover the number 4 Mercedes. Rescue unit still on the scene as well, and any news that we get on Manuel Metzger, of course, we will get that to you. But it was a big shunt, and the concern will have been at first just getting Manuel Metzger out of the car safely.
It did look, obviously we've got the benefit of the onboard camera, so we could see him directly after the shunt, and he seemed
he was
okay
moving, wasn't he? And I thought he was in contact with the team as well, maybe on the radio to tell them what had happened to him, and they knew all about it because of that camera entirely focused on him and his seating position in the car.
One thing I did see were his glasses were absolutely steamed up, which can be a real problem for drivers who do wear glasses in the car. A lot of drivers are unable also to wear contact lenses because of various issues associated, so I'll require glasses in the car, and in conditions such as this it can be a really big problem if you are one of those guys, and not only steaming up the windscreen but steaming up the glasses right in front of your eyes. So another challenge for him.
What about airflow through the car? Is that dependent on you actually moving around the circuit? Because I'm figuring if you've got a nice bit of airflow coming in, that will prevent your glasses from steaming up, but if you stop,
it completely changes car by car. Some cars have a nice blower system, some cars have a nice aircon system. GT cars tend to be a bit better than prototype cars purely because of the more fluid, more loose weight restrictions.
Yes.
But often in wet conditions you'll close those vents off because you'll get water coming in to the vehicle.
Of course. So that's going to add to the moisture and the potential for things steaming up inside the cockpit. Not a nice situation to be in. Would love to have been a fly on the wall regarding the Get Speed performance conversation earlier on, because Maxi Kurtz definitely expecting the number 9 car in a lap earlier, but Fabian Schiller having too much fun, quite possibly, and stayed out for a 9th lap, which is some going in a GT3 car, but obviously slower lap times, less fuel being burned, and there was a couple of code 60s out at the time as well. They were able to eke out that extra bit of fuel mileage, and that remains, I think, the equal longest stint we have had from anybody in SP9. Yes, Alexander Imperatores managed a 9-lap stint earlier on in the 19 KCMG. Maro Engel was busy in conversation with Lucas Stoltz when the number 4 car had its huge accident at the Kleiner Carousel, the Schwalbentrans. Manuel Metzger moving around in the car, so that's encouraging. And just a mess of Mercedes. Front right is taking the brunt of that incident, but it's going to be creating shockwaves all the way through the body of that car. And although it was towed to the side of the road very quickly to enable everyone to get by safely at a limited speed, it's taken until now for that car to be recovered. And Maro Engel quickly over to Lucas Stoltz to console him. Engel, of course, in the slightly better position that he's got another car to race in this event. Lucas Stoltz not with that luxury, and we're not going to see Adam Christodoulou as a result either.
Maro Engel falling down though from what could have been a prospective lead of the race to a P11, so certainly he's not lost nothing in that particular incident. Is that issue again? Well, this was a little earlier on with Metzger just losing the rear slightly, then heads round the outside of the left.
I reckon that's the 35 car that he overtakes initially. Big wiggle as he comes on the approach to Kleiner Carousel, then hits the concrete. That's not really the drama because he's clear of the paving slabs, and then it pitches left, can't catch it, and it swings to the right. And the 35 Porsche he's just overtaken then joins the accident.
Are we absolutely sure he's on wets?
I don't know what tyres he was on.
The behaviour of the car looks extremely wrong tyres to me. It will be interesting if they manage to tow it back or get it back. It'll be really interesting to see. Because we didn't see the pit stop, did we? So we don't know which tyre. But when you see a car snap like that in such just a cold tyre way, you've got to wonder if he's been caught short on a set of inters in the full wear or a set of slicks even. But anyway, nightmare conditions for those guys. And this is what it looks like heading through Spalgansvamp, the exit of the small carousel. Not what you need as a driver in these conditions. Tyre temperatures and pressures fall so much through these long, slow zones.
You got the cogs in my brain ticking then as to whether Manuel Metzger was actually on an outlap, but he wasn't. He was 5 laps into his stint. But then again, it's so cold out there, and you're going splashing through water. That tyre temp is such a difficult thing, first of all, to build up and then retain around the lap, so tricky. And the one thing I didn't hear first time around was the scream from Manuel Metzger of just frustration and disappointment and being so gutted that the race is over this early on, not even making the 6-hour marker. And that for so many people will have been their favourite car in terms of, a likely winner, because it had dominated qualifying to that point. It started from pole position and already so quickly out of the race.
Reminds me so much of last year's tiny bump in turn 1 for Adam Christodoulou that ended up in a race-ending incident for that car. And it's just over so quickly when you're dragging the car through such difficult sections of racetrack with such low grip. Van der Linde is on it, absolutely on it. He's caught Burden for 7th, and he's a man on the move. 20 seconds faster than him last time around. His next target will be Nick Yellerly in the number 99 car, who's pegging him a bit more in terms of pace, but dragging that car very much back into contention, Van der Linde now.
Yeah, Josh Burden getting more and more used to the KCMG's new car. He's raced the Godzilla Nissan in the past. There's a spin right in front of the race leader, Maxi Gertz. And I don't think he had any contact, but blimey, that's how quickly, again, the narrative of this race could change. That was a Cup car, quite possibly, losing it in front of Maximilian Gertz. He leapt on the brakes, and I don't quite know how he managed to avoid that.
Well, the 9 team will be desperately hoping that that wasn't an aided spin for the Cup car in front of Maxi Gertz. Let's see it again, and I don't think so. It looks plenty far enough off the rear end of that Porsche. It may well be, and it was, he's giving him a whack.
There? Yeah, it's the 63, might be 53.
Just the sort of thing that can end up in a penalty, especially when it's caught. And this, a lot of teams love to have the onboard cameras. You love to see them. They're great for your sponsors. But I've got to tell you that if you do make an error in a car with an onboard camera on it, you're going to get picked up for it.
Yeah, and that is the downside of leading the race, I suppose you could say. I reckon it was the RPM Racing Cup car of Milan Kodedek, Bill Vilvert, Marco van Ramshoort and Chris Cools. Try and work out exactly who was driving it. But I mean, first of all, the car slowed. There was much braking that Maxi Gertz wasn't necessarily expecting, and then he just prodded the nose up the inside of the Porsche and contact was made. I'm not convinced there was an AMG gap there to squeeze through, though.
I think race control are pinned in by being very much under pressure to ensure that the professional cars, the top class cars, are not affecting the races of those cars which are not in the professional categories too much. Although, let's have a look at it again. Maxi Goetz down the inside. You've got to say that's a bit late. You've got to say that's a bit late. Whether he'll get a penalty for it, I don't know. Or if Race Direction will consider that to be a racing incident. That Porsche's still there by the time Sven Muller turned up.
Ouch, yes.
And a lot of these decisions can be effect related, with regards to what the detriment was to the other car where it was running, whether it's just a little spin or whether it's out of the race, etc., if there's any damage. So we'll keep our eyes peeled on race control for that one for Maxi Goetz.
It was Bill Vilverts, just to complete that, in the Porsche, who was right in front of Maxi Goetz, and there was contact between the two, resulting in the Cup car spinning, and RPM Racing now waiting for some assistance to get going again. I know the car was stranded broadside, presenting a real difficulty for those following. Running 5th in SP7, and Eschbach and Wippermann. Was that where the incident happened? Because there was briefly a slow zone out, and it's now cleared. So I'm just wondering whether Vilvert's Porsche has got going again. One thing we cannot remove just yet is this lengthy code 60 at the Kleine Carousel as they continue the maintenance work there to repair the barrier.
Maxi Goetz finishes this lap round. It was everybody looked natural, doesn't it, when we cut down to the
no problems here
pits. Yeah, completely normal, just taping over this pit board. Nothing to see here.
Precisely. Well, they don't want to register it on their faces at least, but there will be concern, especially as that's been replayed to the fans around the track and around the world several times now, so there's good footage of it. 18 hours and 20 minutes to go, with Maxi Goetz now onto a 5th lap of potentially an 8-lapper. With Dries Vanthoor, I should say. Laurent's not in the race this year, but younger brother Dries is, and he is expected across the line pretty shortly to complete 33 laps in total. But the leaders only able to manage, with that slow zone in place, north of 10 minutes, almost 11 minutes actually. 10 minutes 45 for Maxi Goetz last time through. Get Speed Performance sorting themselves out for maybe a stop in the not too distant future. That won't be for the 8 car, which is looking more and more like a retirement for Mathieu Vaxivière, I should say. That car still only completed 5 laps.
I wonder if they want to have a look at the number 9 car. I'm just having a look at the right side of it myself, actually. It doesn't look too much even in terms of bodywork damage, but he'll be reporting back obviously immediately if there's any damage. Always amazes me here at the Nurburgring, you get absolute radio coverage for the whole venue. It always really makes me annoyed that we can't manage that at Le Mans and even Spa sometimes. I'm not sure what amazing system. I think it's a satellite system that the teams use, but
German technology, that's what it must be, surely.
It works, it must be, but it's it's Steve Bushman there, just having a bit of a chat, ex-Pro Sport, and he's the principal down there at Get Speed. They'll be making a plan for Maxi Goetz, but I don't know if they want to have a bit of a look at that car. Certainly didn't jump to the pit lane that time round, which would have been their best opportunity to look at the front end of that Mercedes. Certainly I would imagine they've been peeping over the pit wall just to see if there's any damage to the front of that car.
And it's reasonably well lit on the start-finish straight, isn't it? Because you've got the lights from the pit building and the grandstand on driver's left. So, yeah, I mean, it's the simplest form of assessing damage, but thankfully it's on their correct side, as in the right-hand side of the car, so you can check dive planes and things, were it not that Maxi Goetz was streaming across the line at such a great speed. But you could ask him to get close-ish to the pit wall for them to assess it on the move.
Fans in their isolated bubble around the circuit. 150,000 capacity for the GP circuit. Not quite topping that this weekend, but good to see some people at the racetrack. People staying warm, enjoying the race.
Yeah, the really large grandstand that overlooks the Mercedes arena just doesn't look right with nobody in it. So there is that sprinkling of fans, which is great to see, and hopefully just the first of a move in the right direction. It's very much fluid, this whole situation, as you already know, but if you can prove to get fans in and do it safely with temperature checks and remaining in the all-important bubbles, then that is promising for the rest of 2020. Van der Linde, along with Haase, Schramm and Yellowly, the gaps are, well, Yellowly to Schramm, very, very tight indeed. A 99 car turning the screw to try and get into 5th position as those cars stream across the line.
Yeah, too few cars on it, absolutely on it out there at the moment. Both Van der Lindes are on it, and Nick Yellowly all in the 20s, the high 20s, 10-20s, whereas those around that kind of area just cracking into the 30s in general. Leaders, for whatever reason, I know Götz had that little run-in that time around, but he was a 10.45. And Van Thor also at the front on a 10.40. So the Van der Linde and Haase pack are moving in towards the two leaders of the race at the moment, Yellowly and the other Van der Linde in the 42 car further back are putting pressure on their respective sparring partners for their what would it be? It'd be 5th and 6th place, respectively.
So Sheldon van der Linde in 42 and Kelvin VDL in the Audi number 29. Kelvin, the older of the two South African brothers, and the Engstler i30N from Hyundai number 830 is in for a pit stop. Nose to the garage, I notice.
That's closest to the fuel rig, I expect.
Aha, okay. So we don't need to be concerned about that. There's certainly not a great deal of activity down there, so they're not concerned or worried too much about it.
See the drop on the fuel rig?
Okay.
If you can make the fuel rig drop like that, you tend to get a little bit better flow rate.
Yes.
So if you park the car far away, so the line's less, so more horizontal, the flow rate's slightly slower.
So you're working with gravity as well to give you that little bit of extra input for the fuel.
Critical in racing, gravity.
Keeps you on the ground. So, keeps you grounded even. What about
keep me grounded?
What about the battle across the line? Sheldon van der Linde in the 42 BMW, who is right with the... Now, who was that in the Porsche? It was Burden, it must have been. Yeah, 19 KCMG car, and he was past him into 7th place as they crossed the line. 18 hours and 15 minutes to go. You're listening to live coverage of the 48th edition of the 24 hours of the Nurburgring. This is RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. There's a car almost limping into the pit lane, I noticed there. And that's well before the speed limit kicks into life. And Audi technicians, strategists, are covered up on the Pratt perch there to make sure that nasty rain doesn't get inside and affect their screens and their computer systems, their weather forecasts as well. But Phoenix Racing glued to the information that is pouring in from their various cars. They're in a good spot. Yes, they don't need the motor race. The Dries Van Toor in the number 1 Phoenix car is running only 45 seconds away from Maxi Götz. And remember, Maxi's just had some contact with a Porsche Cup car, which could be judged to be his fault. It will go to race control. I'm sure they're looking at that incident again and investigating as to whether Götz could have avoided it. And we are watching for any announcements as to whether the number 9 car will have to take a penalty, perhaps in its next pit stop because of that. Kelvin van der Linde in the 29 car is a further 50 seconds back. But the other car that Phoenix will be concentrating on is Kim Louis Schramm in the 5th placed yellow, blue and red car that Frank Stippler started. Klaus Bachler waiting for the green flag. He saw it to his left and all of a sudden puts the pedal down and jumps ahead of the BMW that he was level with and not permitted to overtake until they saw the greens. And away again into the night he goes.
Those of you following specific cars in various classes, SP9 of course led by Maxi Götz, SPX with the 1 car, the Glickenhaus, Ferdinand Pacer currently on board that. SP8T led by Harper at the moment, Dan Harper in the Valkenhorst
Yeah,
of BMW.
Porsche Carrera Cup GB fame, and then of course got himself a BMW deal, and that's the reason why he's in an M4 this weekend and leading his class. Good to see.
SP7 is led by the number 58 WNS Motorsport of Marvin Dingst at the moment. And then moving down into the Cup classes, we'll keep you informed all the way through.
There's a nice little battle I've just spotted in TCR, because Manuel Lauck and Esteban Guerrieri are separated by only 1.4 seconds, and that is a Veloster versus a Honda Civic. So the Veloster might well be on a slightly better in terms of being deeper into the stint maybe, and it owes us a pit stop. But that is definitely one to keep our eyes on. The 831 and the 170, 29th and 30th overall. Max, sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Just to cover off the rest of GT4, Bonk, Hoffer Racing by Bonk are leading in SP10 at the moment, with Michael Fischer on board.
Okay, and in something like a 7-car class in Cup 5, which is all for BMW 240i's, the 239 car currently leads that, and it is being driven by Eichenberg. But it's always hard fought, that division, and very difficult to call even hours from the end of the race. But Heiko Eichenberg joined by Moritz Oberheim and Ivan Beretz in the class leading 239 machine.
SP9 cars that are maybe not necessarily out of the race, but in functional terms out of the running at the moment. You've got Pereira in the 21 and Von Bohlen in the 100 car, both struggling with issues at the start, and then of course the number 8 car, which we saw in strife early on with Vaxivier still noted, but he is still in the pits with suspected gearbox issues, wasn't it, for that car?
Yeah, it was. They were draining the gearbox reservoir, and that was taking an age to do, and I think maybe Get Speed Performance, with actually 3 cars in the entry, might be fully focused on how the 9 and the 10 are doing instead. The 10, that's one of the Pro-Am cars, isn't it, with the Schaffners, husband and wife team, John and Janine, joined by Marcus Paltela and Maxime Soule. Yeah. So actually, you know, that's a really strong lineup when you think they're gunning for a Pro-Am podium, ideally a win, and the number 10 car is in 25th position currently. So Kelvin van der Linde reaching the repair scene area. This is the run into Schwalbenschwanz, and then pretty much all the way around that arcing left-hander, which the main apex of course, is on concrete. Although, yeah, this is again Galgenkopf for Calvin van der Linde, and he unleashes the throttle. There was a big squirm there from the rear of the Audi, caught a little bit of standing water, I think. Controlled it though, as you would expect, and he then powers underneath suitably the Audi Sport Bridge down the Dottinger Hook.
Very artistic stuff as he heads back down the Dottinger Hook. Just that sort of moment he can catch you right at, though, as you put the throttle back down, tyre temps low, and if there's just not the grip, everybody talks about these cars having ABS and traction control, and if there's not the grip and there's not any traction to control, then it doesn't matter, does it? You're still going to crash the car. Just like you would consider that it's impossible to lock the car up with ABS, which is potentially absolutely true, but then if there's just not the grip to slow the car down, the ABS braking system is gonna magic the car into the apex.
Yeah, and I remember earlier on this year, Oliver Jarvis having a huge moment in his Bentley around Bathurst, Mount Panorama during the 12 hours. You hit the brake pedal that hard to avoid an incident, you get this thing called icing, I think, which is actually the brake pedal pulsing effectively, and that also locks the wheels up. Horrible for Jarvis, and he was launched into an accident not of his own making.
It's just the whole system goes on strike essentially, and completely
buffering,
and just goes, what do you do? I'm going to freeze until you come up with a better idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure he quite had the time to do that in the space allowed. Into the chase. Fabulous race, the Bathurst 12 hour, held every February. Generally the weekend after the Daytona 24 hours as well. Wonder how that's all going to pan out into the new year with COVID-19 and clearly travel restrictions. Long way to go before we get to that point of the motor racing year, though. Kelvin van der Linde on the Grand Prix circuit is thundering his way through the Dunlop hairpin with a couple of cars up ahead, one of which is a Porsche Cayman, able to get by that now.
A lot of gravel there on the outside of the GP loop, wasn't there, for Kelvin van der Linde? Bit of fog coming in as well. Got to wonder how much low cloud. We're moving into the night here, 18 hours only to go, goodness me, as we head through this period of the race. Just checking out, no, they are definitely wet still going on that Porsche GT4 car, as well they should be, with the conditions out there. Bit of a driver change now for the number 75.
So that is Dennis Fetzer, who's just brought in the 75 Porsche. I think this is the only car in the race on Pirelli tyres, by the way. So that's another tyre manufacturer to add to the growing list. You'll probably spot the fact that a lot of the cars have Falcon on the wheel arches. That's because they're an event sponsor and don't necessarily tell you the exact tyres that cars are running on. 44 and 33, yeah, that's correct. But everybody else, generally speaking, running the Michelin tyres if you're in SP9. You've got the Yokos on the BMWs from Valkenhorst. And a couple of Goodyear runners as well, the two Ferraris, that one of which started so well on the front row. Dries van Tor, car number 1, second place. About a minute separates him and the race leader, Maximilian Goertz.
He's getting caught, though, by van der Linde relatively quickly, actually. Dropped 20 seconds to him last lap round. Traffic plays into that, of course. But dropped 20 seconds to both van der Linde, Hasse and Yellerly as well that time through. So Dries van Tor needs to find a bit of speed, and we did see the Audis struggling a bit in relation to the other cars in the full wet conditions. Although that said, Kelvin van der Linde pursuing in behind is of course in the same chassis. So Dries van Tor currently getting caught a bit. The man not getting caught a bit is Maxi Götz at the front of the field, who is holding similar pace to all of his pursuers. But I suspect the battle that's going to rage next for us will be between Hasse Yellerly when he gets involved with decent pace. Van der Linde all catching Dries van Tor for second place.
Maxi Goertz looking like he's got the blues and twos on there, and that's because it's the positional numbers that appear as you look at the car top left of the windscreen, but they flash every couple of seconds and illuminate the road in front of him. So that's to enable the cars from the lower classes to realise that there is a really quick SP9 car approaching, and they can make their own arrangements to hopefully part the waves for Maxi Goertz. It's not always possible. You've got to stick to, you know, your natural racing line. Last thing you want to do is end up in your own accident because you're trying to make a way clear for the SP9s, and it's really the responsibility of the faster car to find the safe way by.
The lights, as I understand, are dished out generally after the ADAC qualifying race to the top 30 participants.
That's how I understood it as well, yes.
Was there an ADAC qualifying race this year?
For this race, no.
So how have they given them out?
It's a very good question. Now, we had... Thanks for asking me that, right at the end of my stint. We had 13 pre-qualifiers, because top qualifying was split into 2 sessions this year. 13 that were already put into top qualifying 2, the second session. And that was all done on sector split times rather than results in previous VLN races. So it's a little bit like how the Indy 500 is done and qualifying for that.
A bit like how drivers are graded, sort of thing. Take a look at all of the stints and maybe take a bit of a view.
Yeah. So we got one sheet with the 13 cars already pre-qualified, and then everybody else in SP9 and the Glickenhaus, which is in SPX, and one extra car as potentially eligible for the second sector, but you had to finish in that first session top 4, because there were top 4 places up for grabs to make it 17 cars then gunning it for pole position. And that made 31 when you add them all together. So I just wonder whether the blue lights went to those 31 cars.
So I had to go down into the middle of Adenauer and buy another blue light then.
Yeah, find a shop that delivers them the black market of blue lights. And they're very, very useful in the race, definitely give you an advantage.
It's Fred. He does our tyres at United Autosports.
Oh, good stuff. From Michelin.
Yep.
And he is literally hand-cutting tyres in the garage there, adding a bit of extra tread to a wet weather Michelin tyre, ready to for that to be bolted onto an SP9 car in the near future.
Yeah, we've seen Michelin. We've seen a lot of different tyre manufacturers doing that. Potentially just sharpening up the grooves of the tread. Not something I'm particularly used to, honestly. I've not seen tyre guys taking Stanleys to my tyres too much in the past. But yeah, we have seen all manufacturers of tyres doing that. So that's not a Michelin thing.
No,
it's a tyre man thing.
But good to see that the craftsmanship is not dead, very much alive in the Nurburgring pit lane. And you dread to think how many times he's got to do that too. It might just be for this phase of the race, of course.
I wonder if he's just taking where the tyre is overworked. They tend to fluff around the edges of the tread block. And I wonder if he's just basically resharpening the edges of the tread block so they get the water clearance so they can use that set of wets again. Obviously, a massive number of wet tyres required. And although there's not necessarily an allocation limit of wet tyres, there are often only so many in the truck. And it's literally that. You talk to your tyre supplier and go, how many wets have we got each? Because the understanding that the entire race might be wet, I would imagine would be filling some tyre engineers with dread about the pure number of wet tyres available for all of the various cars. And being open on tyres, the tyre compounds and constructions used tend to be the more expensive ones as well.
What happened a moment or two ago at the end of the lap, there was a car completely sideways. It was one of the Bayer concept Porsches. I thought for a moment it could have been either 44 or 33 from Team Falcon, but wasn't quite the right livery for that. Patrick Kolb arriving on the scene in the Uber Motorsport machine. He's already had a big moment down at the first corner, which ended up putting the 25 car into the gravel, misjudging his braking point, and nearly T-boning another Porsche there. Thankfully, that incident was avoided. That's the second time in this race now where we've had a car at 90 degrees to the direction of travel at Tiergarten. Really don't like to see that. It's a narrow enough part of the track before things like that happen.
It is an area where it's easy to spin on the power, though, and that's what we have seen there both times with cars trying desperately to keep the car out of the wall, but then, of course, you end up marooning your car in the middle of the road, and that's the issue that we've seen. One of the Toyotas parked in the pit box, the 120 car, looking like they're doing a little bit of servicing work with this car. It's the Corolla.
Yeah, two Corolla Altis brought to the racetrack by Toyota Gazoo Racing. You might not know that team name from elsewhere in motorsport after a cracking result last weekend at the 24 Hours Le Mans, and indeed in the World Rally Championship as well in Turkey. But this is the Team Thailand arm of Gazoo Racing, bringing two Corolla Altises to the ring once again. Certainly not the first time we've seen these two cars. You tune to RS1, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. We are now a quarter of the way in. So much time still to go, but that is a little milestone, nevertheless, for everybody involved. I'll leave you in the good company of Alex Brundle as Johnny Palmer stepping out and Joe Bradley soon to join.
Thanks, Johnny, and we'll be certainly hearing you a few times later on, just for a few more hours of this 24-hour race, as we watch the work still continuing on that Toyota Corolla, and a bit of windscreen cleaning as well. But I'm not sure that'll be the absolute intention of this particular pit stop, inside and out. Bit of Rain-X as well, no doubt, to make sure that doesn't do too much fogging up through the next stint. And it's this work, this kind of environment. It's not just a small team environment. This is what you got, whether you got a GT3 car or whether you brought your Toyota along. The area of pits that you're using is absolutely the same, come big or small team. Big teams tend to get their elbows out a little bit more, as we see our leader heading through the Grand Prix loop. He looks to have potentially stopped slightly, but there's still a bit of standing water around the Grand Prix loop as he comes up to a little bit of traffic. And Joe Bradley joins me in the box. What do you know, Joe?
Well, it all kicked off when I left, didn't it? I've been watching things happen, and it's a bit of a sad tragedy for me to see the number 4 go out, because good mate of mine, Adam Christodoulou, was due to get in that car at 10:30 tonight. and he's just not going to get in the car, is he? Because I have spoke to him, and I said, so have you had any feedback as to what caused it? He said it was netcode, which is an esports virtual racing thing. But in fairness, it kind of did look like a bit like that, didn't it? The car just veered off to the right and struck the barrier, didn't it? It was a bit odd.
Certainly did. Netcode, of course.
Yeah.
It's when that's when the two computers get confused over where both the cars are, isn't it?
And yes. And we whinge about it because someone's in California and I'm in the UK, and our computer's not sorting it out too realistic enough. I mean,
well, he didn't sort it out too realistically enough, and he very realistically arrived in the barrier on the exit of the small carousel, unfortunately. And as you say, real shame for Adam and that whole team. He's not going to get a run tonight.
And also, Alex, we were just talking before you came on for your stint about tyre choice, because at that time the track condition was erring on the verge of dryness, and slick tyres being an option. We were puzzled, weren't we, by the leading Mercedes going on to wets, but then it dawned on us, they've got access to more accurate weather forecasting. And
sorry, just watching that white windscreen wiper on the leading car there, it looked for all the world like a bit of tyre flapping around out the left hand side, like it just picked up a puncture. But you're absolutely right. We were confused, bemused by cars seemingly staying on wets. I perhaps thought it could be something to do with passing traffic, which can be really difficult here. But if you've got a load of rain on the radar, you then, there are two questions really you ask your engineer: how long is this rain for, and how hard?
Yeah,
and if it's going to come in again, then you have to make the decision that's going to be right, not now, but in an hour from now when you've done your 9 laps.
But then, so what we effectively had was the number 9 current leader, Maxi Goetz, in the car at the moment. We had the number 9 go out on wet tyres on what was a drying track, and it was a good lap and a half before we went to before we got some precipitation. How easy is it to destroy a set of wets on a dry track?
Very, very easy. It's very easy, especially over that kind of distance. You've got to remember here that you're always turning the car. You're always pushing the tyre and turning the car. So actually being on the wrong tyre here can be absolutely brutal, as that looked like a penalty, didn't it, for the number 19 Porsche, just parked at the end of the pit lane. Now he's gone in to continue with his stop. So that's a bit of a hold up for a car very much in the hunt. And I mean, you can route a set of wets in 1 lap of the Nurburgring. They'll be over and done with. Oof, big spin as well on the way down through the Hudson back there, managed nicely by Christopher Hasse. It's all going off everywhere.
Yeah, we kind of were suspicious that it was going to be a very eventful race. The Nurburgring 24 hours always is, but just add water and it becomes a very, very, very treacherous exercise for everybody, and perhaps you could argue even more so for the slow categories, because they've not just got to look in front of them, but also be very, very aware what's behind.
Well, the slow categories have less information, have less tyre options, have less engineering capability, have less choice with regards to the setup of their car, and potentially, not always the case, certainly, but potentially less knowledge and experience of the conditions. And yes, it can be an absolutely massive challenge if you just don't have that information to play with. As we see Sheldon Van Linder fighting very hard with the number 5 Audi. There are those strobe lights down into turn 4 on the Grand Prix loop, and managing to find his way past. But yes, certainly the slower categories are those that will be suffering, and also will be suffering from any mistakes in the fast stuff as well.
And pit stops aplenty, a very crowded pit lane, but not as crowded as we are used to in the Nurburgring 24 hours. Only 97 cars took to the track, and when I say that, I say that very tongue-in-cheek, only 97. It's perhaps the biggest grid of cars that we kind of cover in any endurance race across the world, but 97 entries is way down for obvious reasons, which we don't really need to go into. I'm trying to fathom which of the cars that we've actually lost, and as far as I can gather, it's only the number 8, the Get Speed Performance Mercedes.
Totally out of the race. Is only the black markers over number 8. But there are several SP9 cars that are essentially out of the running as the 19 makes its move again. Interestingly, just cover off that change for position then. Van der Linde in the 42, passing Schramm in the number 5 car. And his brother at the moment is homing in very aggressively on Dries van Thor at the front.
And of course the number 4, which we've lost, which is falling down the order. Do we know if that car's been recovered at the pits?
We'll be able to see on this camera for Kelvin in the 29 as he heads through. See if it's still stranded out there. No, he's gone. That's still in the large carousel. Let me check on my driver tracker. I hadn't seen it come back in specifically, but I also haven't seen it parked out on the outside of Schwalbenschwanz. So it's not sitting on the driver tracker at Schwalbenschwanz. So one would assume that it has been back, but then certainly we've not seen it being worked on either.
No.
And it would, if it was retired from the race, it wouldn't be on the tracker, but then it would be on the timing screen as retired. So
yeah, it's showing as running, which doesn't necessarily mean it's running on the track. It just means it's still effectively in the race and potentially being recovered. I'm just trying to find a car in the order. It's the 91, which is a bit down the order, in 83rd spot. It's running in 3rd place in SP3T. It's the Gitti Tyre Motorsport. Gitti? Are we saying Gitti or GT?
Yeah.
Gitti, it's Italian, isn't it? The Gitti Tyre Motorsport for VW Golf. Now, David Drinkwater is in that car, and I've been in touch with David, sharing the car with Nicholas Cry, Wayne Stephen Moore, and Tommy Forchontra from France. David reports that his words for his first stint, that was nuts, but awesome at the same time. I think we can all understand that. So much oil down from the Lamborghini. It was like driving on ice with the greasy conditions, then a load of oil just to make it a bit interesting. I think we speculated on that, didn't we? Quite a few cars doing a bit of rallycross, circling of the yellows. We've just had an issue with the fueling. Now, this was a couple of pit stops ago and only put 42 laps in. That's what he says. I'm not sure if the Volkswagen Golf will actually do 42 laps on a tank. Sorry, 42 litres.
42 litres.
That makes sense, doesn't it, in the message? So they were going to have to stop in a couple of laps. So the 91, because of that issue in that pit stop. Thanks for that, David. It's great to get that info direct from the pit lane and from the 91 pit. But that's what's put that car out of running down the order. However, still in a podium position in that class.
Nice. Always good to hear from the competitors in all of the various different classes, following the leader then. And interestingly, no discussion of the little bump Maximilian Gotz had with a back marker in the middle of the northern loop in terms of any kind of penalty. It's not even been discussed as being under investigation so far as we've seen on the on Race Control News channel. So at the moment he appears to have got away with that. Those of you asking on Twitter, is the Manta running? The Manta is not entered in the race, unfortunately.
2020 just keeps on going downhill. That was very sad. It's always been kind of a feature of this event, seeing the Manta Foxtail.
Can-Am John's been in touch, talking about knifing the tyres. Very interesting, something I've not come across before at all. And you slice the middle of the tread block. Apparently that's what Fred, my Michelin engineer, was doing to that set of wets. You slice the middle of the tread block to make them move and heat up, which makes perfect sense. If you're struggling a lot with tyre temperature, it's the movement of the rubber which generates the tyre temperature, and that's a big part of running a wet, actually, not just the water clearance, but also the way they heat up in wet conditions. And so it makes the tyres heat up. Indication there that the track temp and the difficulty in getting the temperature in the tyres is definitely there for all the competitors.
Yoda's uncle is informing me that the number 4 is actually in the dead car park.
Yes.
The dead car park, I should say.
Okay, so out of the race then.
Yeah, it's out of the race, and that's official. It's in the order. It's dropping down the field, obviously. And another bit of information from Jean Chavet. Guiti is from Singapore. I always thought it was an Italian make. So thanks for that, Jean. More pit stops, this time for one of the Audis. Into the pits for tyres. No hurry there going on to putting that set of tyres on. It is the number 3 car that's in 4th place.
Haas on board, and this is the big fight then. So Van der Linde was 32 seconds back from Van Thor at the front, who stayed out one extra lap. And then Haas was about 11 seconds back from him. Yellowly still also in the box, but he was out of it about a minute back. But it's Haas and Van der Linde that were fighting relatively hard over that final podium position, trying to take that away from each other. And here then is the number 10 car, which is running a little further back, 25th position. That family effort you were talking about, Schaffner on board, but shortly to be replaced, it appears. Fuel going in to that Pro-Am Get Speed car. So, as we've seen all the way through the race, Gotts and Van Thor in that group that are running just a little bit longer could pay dividends at the end of the race. Then you've got Van der Linde, Haas, Yellowly, the other Kelvin Van der Linde in the Audi, and Schramm all pitting together. You've got Sheldon Van der Linde not in the Audi, in the BMW number 42, pitting as well further back down the order. So
at this stage, Alex, where you see the lead sort of kind of flip-flop, because we'll soon see the cars that are running in first, second and third, they're going to be due a pit stop very soon. As a driver and a team in that position, where is your head? Where are you thinking about? We're nowhere near back timing yet, are we, towards the finish? There's so much could happen. 17 hours and 44 minutes to go. We're nowhere near thinking about that, are we?
Well, in this condition, you're almost certainly assuming that a change of circuit condition at some point will equalise everyone on stop. So there will be a certain point where everybody has to take an alternate tyre at the same time. So I would be imagining on the pit wall that all of these teams are assuming that any fuel deficit will be cancelled by tyre condition. What won't be cancelled is how long the previous stint was, and therefore how long you have to pit for, which will give each of the cars track position on account of the NLS system that we know and don't love, with regards to how complicated that is. A lot of this will be a case of how long the previous stint was before these guys all eventually need slicks or inters or whatever they need differently from the wet tyres they're currently on, and then that'll play the track position out through the next phase of this race. At the moment, it's pretty tight at the front. And all of the drivers, although they are racing relatively closely, 30 seconds back, 11 seconds back, etc., can't see each other. So they're just, as a driver in this position, you're just grinding out laps and trying to ignore it if anybody's catching you, and trying to grab hold of it if you're catching anyone else. This is the slow zone we've got at the moment in the Hatzenbach. That looks like a set of Mustang tail lights to me.
Hard to judge. You're a better man than me for having a bash at that one, but he did go straight on into the Hatzenbach, first part of the Hatzenbach. swinging into the left-hander just before it goes right, left, right again, and the car just seemingly straight lining and frontal contact with the barrier. We'll try and get an identification on exactly what car that was. But it is pitch black out there, and all we had was tail lights to identify the car from. A good spot by Alex.
Looked like Mustang tail lights.
Yeah.
Looked like, but then it came round. And it had a very Porsche front end. So either it's two cars welded together, or I've got one end wrong.
The Fricadelli car is in the pits. The Fricadelli Porsche, and that car into the pits with cars around it. Car in 9th place, Phoenix Racing Audi in and already leaving the pit lane. That's car 5 in 9th. We've got the number 31 Fricadelli Porsche in, and then just behind them on the road, the number 98. That's the Rover Racing BMW M6. And Whitman has brought the car in the 98, and that car running 35 seconds behind the number 31 Fricadelli car. So that's a pretty good race at this point in the race. Lars Kern at the wheel. Not sure if he's going to be turning that car over to one of his teammates.
So tight in the traffic for Christopher Haas, chasing down Van der Linde in the 29, clearing his way through one of the GT4 Aston Martins now. Gets a gap on the inside, drifting slightly wide, and then just doing this hour after hour on end. One of those textbook slides we've seen all the way through in wet conditions from the Audi. Touch of oversteer on the power, and just the next driver's getting ready in the Gex Speed camp, ready to rock and roll in the leading car.
Josh Barrett tweets Alex, he admires your optimism that there might be a stage in this race where slicks can be used and bring everything back into order. I've got to say that the weather forecast that we've seen, there is a reduced chance of rain towards tomorrow lunchtime, towards the end of this race. However, on saying that forecast has changed several times in the last 6 hours. So, yes, who knows? It's basically feeling as you go.
The circuit situated in a massive band of forest. It's the same band of forest that runs across all the way to Spa, so I'm told. So the legend goes, and I've spent some time there, and it just gives this massively unpredictable weather system, a bit in a very similar way to, of course, legendarily happens at Spa-Francorchamps. So it's so hard that the weather pops up. It's not a case of you can watch on the radar a big weather front coming in and take a view. It pops up and then goes away, because the trees and the various rolling landscape around the ring are changing and affecting the way the weather plays out. I will be in pure disbelief if we run now on wets till the absolute end of the race, all 17 hours of it, but could happen, couldn't it? And
Germany and the Eifel running in September, there was always a good chance, and we've had, I think we mentioned earlier, we've had hail when the race has been run in May.
So there's Marciello getting ready to get back in the 9. Would have thought we'll see Maximilian Gotz breaking to the pits this time, and that set of wets now waiting for him down in the pit lane. In comes the leader, and this will settle him back into the pack, although the two cars behind him, both Van Thor and in fact almost everyone behind him in immediate contact down to Engel, owe him a pit stop as well, so he'll still retain the virtual lead of the event with a little bit of fuel margin too, having been out front. Fuel hose goes in, car goes up, and they'll spin it around as they're putting the tyres on, and Raffaele Marciello is going to be installed. Nice relaxed pit stop as a driver here in Nurburgring, because it takes a bit, obviously you've got the limitation on pure time, and it also takes a bit of time to get the fuel in the car. Had to park a long way out from the rig there, haven't they?
Yes, luckily, they are. The rig is at full stretch to get that. Marciello was the starting driver, let's not forget, in the number 9, and a fabulous first couple of stints. into the pits has come the number 1 Audi from second place. Dries van Tor bringing that car to a halt, right on his marks. And car going up on the jack, swiveling round at 45 degrees, purely to assist in the exit from the pit apron. Car pointing in the right direction.
Electric guns, of course, no pneumatic supply.
Of course, yes. I was wondering, Alex, if you got a chance to have a look at the tyre wear on that car, but the pit crew were a bit too quick, weren't they?
Yeah, very much so. Obviously, the GT3 here, one of the only classes that are allowed to use the central wheel nut. As soon as you go back into GT4, you're on 4 lug nuts, NASCAR style, or more. Yeah. And let's have a look at them. If those are the tyres that indeed have just come off, I would have thought the wets will be in reasonably good condition. A bit of gluing up of the sills to make sure that they don't wear anymore. Can often be a very big issue if they start to delaminate. Look at that, big gluing up the outside sill. You don't need too much water flowing in, or you don't need any kind of delamination of the outside of the floor of that Audi. Just the sort of thing that can happen over the exit of ice curve or throughout the Vickerman section.
I would imagine as well at 165, 170 miles an hour, which is the top end speed down the Dottinger hole, that could end up being quite a problem with air getting in there and just ripping the rest of the floor tree off.
Yeah, that's absolutely what they're trying to prevent, the cleaning up of the air around those sills. Nothing on these race cars is here by mistake. It's all there for a reason. It has a structural rigidity and structural strength that needs to be respected. Leading car sitting there waiting for their pit stop time to pass. Full stint that time for Max Gotts. There sits the number 1 Audi. And you get this bizarre situation here in the race as he actually heads back out on circuit. And you get this bizarre situation because the pit stops are so long, where those leading teams, even if you're 25, 30, 45 a minute back from the car ahead, you actually end up sitting there just across from him in the pits, staring at him if you're in sequence. And it is Raffaello Marcello who is in the number 9. And I didn't see actually if Dries van Tor has been replaced. A little bit of murk on the window there, so we'll have to wait until the timing screen resets itself to see if anybody has taken over the number 1 Audi.
Let's have a look at the rest of our classes, shall we? It's been a little while since we checked in. SPX, I believe the Glickenhaus is the only car running in the SPX class. Fernandez Laser currently at the wheel of the Glickenhaus. That's currently in 18th place overall. We've got SP9s running as expected at the front of the field from first down to 24th, 26th actually. A bit of an interloper in the 25th spot. That's the Volkenhurst Motorsport BMW M4 GT4 in the SP&T class, currently class leader. Great drive from Guerrieri in the Honda Civic, brings him to the front of the TCR class, and currently 27th overall, 33 laps completed in comparison to 37 laps just completed by the leading SP9 car. So great run that from a TCR runner and leading the class. SP10 just behind the 170, the TCR class leader. SP10 class leader is the BMW M4 GT4 Hofer Racing by Bonk Motorsport. That car currently 28th overall. Then just behind them, about 10 seconds behind them, is the SP7 class leader, currently 29th overall. A further 48 seconds behind the SP7. Sorry, no, that's 37 seconds behind the SP7 class leader is the Cup 3 leader. That's the Black Falcon Team Techstar Porsche Cayman, right behind. And just looking at the lap times there, not really going to gain on the W&S Motorsport Porsche Cayman ahead of them in the SP7 class. That's not relevant though, because they're both in separate classes, SP7 and Cup 3, 29th and 30th. The first of the Cup X runners, they're in 32nd place overall, and that's the Teichmann Racing KTM Crossbow, car 111. First in the KI Cup 5 category, Team Aviasol Rennsport BMW M240i. I do love the look of those 240i's. And that's a BMW, and I'm not really a BMW man, I'm a Merc driver, so that's big coming from me. They're 35th overall in that class, and then gonna have to scroll down to 44th place overall for the SP Pro class leader, Black Falcon Team Identica. That's a Porsche 911 GT3 Cup, and they have completed 31 laps to be at the head of that class. V3T, 46th spot overall. That's the Team Maxall Racing Porsche 718 Cayman S. And further down the order, in 49th spot overall, it's the Pixum CFN Team Adrenaline BMW 330i. And where did I say they were? They were 51st overall in the field. SP8 is in 52nd. The SP8 class leader, I should say, is in 52nd spot overall. It's the Nova Racing with Toyo tyres Lexus, and 52nd overall for the SP8 class leader. SP3T class leader, 55th place overall. It's the Engstler Motorsport Hyundai i30 Fastback. And then we've got 3 more class leaders running together on the road, all completed 30 laps and on their 31st lap. So first in 57th spot, SP4T leader is the Porsche Cayman, hasn't got a team yet. Coppen is the driver of that car in 57th place. Right behind them on the road is the 58th spot, is the V6 class leader, and that's the Pixum CFN Team Adrenaline Porsche Cayman. And then again, a further 1 minute and 56 behind them on the road in 60th spot is the, 59th spot is the Ford Motors Bio Concept car. That's the Porsche 911 running the bioethanol.
Oh, Marcello spin in the leading car.
Oh,
that looks like it's in the Forest Chicane. And let's see if he gets that one going. Sorry to interrupt your run through the field. Important to check in on all the other classes, of course.
That's pretty important, isn't it?
But Marcello's going to have to find reverse in the number 9 Mercedes here. And this is a replay, so we'll be able to check out the sectors. This happened just a few moments ago. And has he damaged it? Looks like he might have damaged it, Bradders.
I'll be amazed if he hasn't gotten any damage on that. He's pulling up, isn't he? He's on driver's left. Where did we identify that as, Alex?
It looked like the Forest Chicane to me, the first left-hander of the Forest Chicane. And where is that? That looks like a little further down the road. Let's have a look if we can see him on the driver tracker. And where has he managed to make it to? The number guy, he's just on the exit of Callanhard, parked up on the exit of Callanhard, and on his way down to Versiphon. Car is still on, you can hear all the pumps running, but no movement, and you've got to wonder if he's had some sort of failure there, Marcello. He didn't appear to hit anything, did he, in the Forest Chicane? So he's had a spin in the Forest Chicane and then bimbled down all the way to the exit of Callanhard. Well, goodness me. Let's have a look at it again then. Here's Marcello. He's going in. And that's the base of the foxhole. And he's headed over the apex curb into the Forest Chicane. There's the first right of the Forest Chicane. And it's here where he's just going to lose the rear end. I wonder if he's had a rear suspension failure or something similar. The rear did appear to sink and not deliver grip as he went into the left-hander there.
You know how Adam Christodoulou described the number 4 going off as net code because it was a very bizarre accident?
You can see yes, there. It's at a strange angle.
He's lost a wheel.
Yeah, could well have lost a wheel or had some sort of, because there's no reason why it would be stopping just for that spin. So it must be, and it looked to me as he turned into the left-hander that the rear right of that Mercedes did not deliver grip, and the fact he's got no drive indicates that the rear wheel may be out of the drive pack. Of course, if you've not got two rear wheels on the car, a limited slip diff will just literally allow the right-hand wheel to freely spin. No strap mode like you have in Formula 1 to lock those wheels together and make it get back to the pits, I don't think. And I suspect he cannot get that back to the pits. And he's getting out. He's getting out.
If he stays with the car and gets recovered back to the pits, are the team allowed to repair the car?
Certainly there will be.
It's not classed as outside assistance.
No, if they can drag it back to the pits, they'll be able to repair it. But it's a case of being...
Is the rule where the driver has to stay with the car?
Certainly the driver the driver can't leave the car. Le Mans rules, etc. You can't disappear. And you can't receive outside assistance, for example, somebody giving you a spanner that wasn't in the car, etc.
Or a spare battery, like what happened last weekend.
Certainly, but the car can be dragged back, and look at the devastation on Marciello's face. Well, we can't see his face because it's absolutely buried in his hands, sitting in the number 9 Mercedes. Normally, that kind of thing would happen at a big, high-load area of the circuit. It just seemed to fail for him. Get Speed Performance watching on.
You know what, Alex? We've had the number 4 Mercedes go out whilst leading this race in a bizarre off. We've now got the current leader, the number 9 Mercedes team, Get Speed, off at the side of the track, and very much, I mean, even if he recovers the car, it's out of contention, isn't it?
I feel for him.
And you can see Rafael Marciello's body language is just showing how desperate that situation is. He remains seated in the car, hands to his face inside of his helmet as the recovery teams arrive. The course vehicle is already on site and will be messaging the information required with regards to recovering that vehicle. And it's just, that is just such a sad sight to see.
It's just a driver. He's pulled his radio cable out because he knows that there is nothing he can do about that. If the rear wheel is not connected, look at it. Look, the rear just gives up completely. He's not out of control there. The rear right just gives up completely. And so he's managed to bimble it along with the wheel still somewhat connected, I suspect. Giving him forward drive, then eventually it's just given up. Of course, it's a hill on the exit of Callanhard there. You're going uphill, so it will then eventually just give out and not provide the driver with any forward drive. He's staying in the car, of course, because someone will have to steer it all the way around the circuit. And they're gutted at Get Speed.
As a driver, he will have felt the car break away, may have even felt something break in the rear, and that's the only information you can really pass on, isn't it? That, I felt something break in the rear, the car has gone off, I wasn't able to control it. That car being recovered now, the number 9 we can see is being recovered, but as he goes into, well, like you said, Alex, not a very high load, use the curb on the left.
You could perhaps argue that the foxhole is a relatively big compression for the rear suspension.
Is that a big compression area?
And it's something started in the foxhole, and then eventually that's really the first time he's put load on it again after the base of the foxhole. And for whatever reason, that has been the place where the rear has given up on Marciello. He'll be able to steer it back to the pits and stay in the car. They have a long night ahead of them. Anything can happen here, though. Inclement weather conditions, difficult circuit, and a lot of mistakes out there being made already. He's absolutely gutted, but they need to stay in it, keep pounding round. We've seen this race to and fro so many times.
Michael Hetherington, hello Michael, from the northeast. Michael says, I'd be interested to see the heart rate of the drivers. You can give us a bit of an insight into that, Alex.
Lower.
At a place like this, all right, you're fresh from Le Mans. In comparison to Le Mans, which is all about the straights, isn't it? this place, I would imagine your heart rate very rarely comes down, surely.
I've seen some interesting pieces of data about this, actually. Several drivers have worn heart rate monitors in the car. And what's interesting is it doesn't trend very much with physical exertion. It trends almost definitely with, what do you want to call it? Alertness, anxiety,
right.
Pressure,
like a burst of adrenaline.
Exactly, and absolutely, it's often the case. It's often the case that I'm just watching him lose out again down into Callanhard. Looked to go long on the brakes there, didn't he? Actually, in Callanhard. But it trends a lot with the amount of pressure that the drivers are under, as opposed to the sheer exertion. The physical exertion of driving these cars around here in the wet is not huge. You're not pulling massive G. So
it's not like you're going to the gym and throwing weights around to get your heart rate up. It's a reverse of that, if anything.
It just, your mind obviously uses a massive amount of calories.
Yes.
Just purely because you're concentrated, you're focused the entire time. And often in conditions like this, when you see drivers single stinting or jumping out after two, that's what they're being changed for. They're being changed for their focus. They're being changed for their ability to, string the car between the traffic lap after lap after lap without making any mistakes.
Right.
Because it does wear on you, and you do start to make silly, tired errors if you're in the car for too long. But you're not lifting weights in there.
But I would imagine if your heart rate, you can cycle very slowly and get your heart rate to run at 120 for 30 minutes, and you're haggard at the end of that 30 minutes. That's the kind of reverse exertion that I mean. If you're running at what's your average heart rate when you're running? Have you ever measured yourself?
140, 150.
Right,
like
and
that.
In the car, you're matching that.
Yeah, you'd sit in that kind of zone.
Yeah, but you're not running
Certainly
to create that.
It's the pure engagement.
Yeah.
I mean, with prototype racing, there is great muscular engagement. You're really holding yourself firm in the car. There's big force on the driver.
Because of the G-force.
Because of the G-force you're fighting against. And even though you've got power steering, the steering needs still to be pretty firm because you have to have feel. So you will still, if you're underprepared for an event, feel the shoulder, feel the neck, and the neck will go. And at the end of a test day, you will still just feel the invisible hand of G-force slam you against the side of the cockpit.
What about your legs? What about your feet on the pedals?
It's
the
a huge
G-force
deal.
Moving your feet off the pedals, I would imagine.
It's a huge deal, and you have to be very strong from the pelvis and the thigh downwards to hold the legs in a modern prototype car. We have those tunnels, the F1 style tunnels, which help a lot with positioning your legs.
Yeah.
But obviously a function of sharing the car with various different drivers is that some guys will need more space than others. Everybody has to be able to make it over to the clutch in a hurry if they have to. So you'll not have quite the support you want, inevitably. And yes, it's an area of your body you really need to be very strong, sort of from the thigh through to the midriff, and that grounds your whole effort inside the car to keep you firm and stable. Because now, however tight you do your belts up, you flop about like a rag doll as soon as you get out of there.
And what about a GT3 car, which is, all right, the confines of the racing seat kind of trap your top of your thighs, but then from the knee down, your feet are on the pedals in that kind of open footwell.
Several things can break you in a GT car. The main one is temperature. And the other one is brake pressure. Brake pressure is huge with ABS systems. Depending on which model you're in, some of them need huge brake pressure. It depends on the ratio of the master cylinders.
Is that because you're pressing the brake as hard as you can?
Because obviously you can press the brakes extremely hard and not lock up.
Right.
So actually, there was a tendency a little while back now for the road master cylinders to be used in a GT3 car, which meant that to achieve the brake pressure, you had to really lay into the brake pedal several times a lap, and that was incredibly difficult. I'm just wondering if we were seeing a little bit of contact there. I don't think that was the Marcello car getting contact. It'd be good to have a look at that again as he gets tugged back to the pits. We've got the Glickenhaus in pit road as well, the 704 car, the sole runner in SPX. For those interested, that's sitting in 18th spot at the moment. Top non-SP9 car. Top car that's neither in XPX or SP9 is the SP8T BMW with Dan Harper at the wheel, currently sitting in 26th place with the top SP10, the number 70 for company in 27th.
So Darren Wood is asking the question. Hello, Darren. I know you're a big fan of the N24.
He's parked it.
Has he parked it? He's been recovered though, isn't he? We're talking about Marcello here. Darren's question is, how long has the car been out of the pits? And from the data I've got in front of me, the car had been out of the pits for 8 laps. Or was that his outlap into his 3rd stint? So I've got the data here that says
that 9 lap stints are possible, so
right,
it was towards the end.
Towards the end, as far as the data is concerned.
They'd obviously boxed him after 5 before that, but that will have been a tyre call.
I've got more data coming in. It was his outlap.
That was his outlap.
Yeah. I've got that confirmed. It was his outlap, and so that wasn't a suspension failure, Alex. That was a loose wheel.
That was a loose wheel.
That was a not adequately put on wheel. So thanks for asking that.
It made it all the way round, all the way through the Flugplatz, down the foxhole, and up to the Forest chicane. Goodness me, he's been through that. He's been through the 6th gear Schwedenkreuz on a
wheel breaking loose.
It just tells. So what's obviously happened there is in the base of the foxhole, it's just given up eventually and come loose.
It's when the car is slowed down that's enabled the wheel to come off.
You could see it at an angle as it sat there on the curve, couldn't you?
Yes.
Goodness me. Let's have a look at that start again.
It's been an eventful Nurburgring 24 hours that we all expected it to be. The Nürburgring will always throw up anomalies and vagaries, and the challenge of this place in itself is something, but when you add in some horrendous bad weather and some very heavy rain with standing water, hard enough to drive the Grand Prix track, the Grand Prix track, and then get out onto the Nordschleife, but we did, and we've been racing for a considerable amount of time still. And there's a considerable amount of time left for anything to happen. We've lost 2 cars already from the lead position of this race. The number 4 Mercedes went out after contact with the barrier, and we are just off the back of watching the right-hand rear wheel leave the number 9 Mercedes, also in the lead position.
Just looking at another piece of footage off screen, we have seen it when Marciello hit the wall a second time trying to get back with that loose wheel incredibly hard on the outside of Callanhard. So there'll be further damage to the front of that Mercedes, unfortunately, when he gets it back to the pits. It's absolutely massive impact, as we see the similarly sized impact for the number 100 BMW SP9 car that was out of the race earlier on. That pulled back.
And a very angry Jörg Buller, that number 100 BMW, pulled back behind the barrier, and then kind of no effort was seen to be being made. The car is still way down the order. I think they eventually did get that number 100 back to the pits. Then we had the leading Lamborghini, or one of the certainly the main contenders, the Conrad Motorsport Lamborghini, having I think, have we had that confirmed as a gearbox oil leak?
No, so that car was ditching fluid. That car was ditching oil. I'm not sure if it was gearbox oil or certainly
diff oil.
Certainly the other Mercedes, which was out earlier on, back to the airs, Mercedes was out with a gearbox issue. The other Get Speed car, but that was ditching fluid, the Conrad car, and didn't make it back round. And just after, well, they had a spell in the lead, didn't they? The number 9 car looked all to be going oh so well for that squad just after Raffaele Marciello took over the car. That disaster absolutely struck with that loose right-hand wheel. Let's see if we can see it as it heads out of pit lane. All looks to be well on the way around. Number 4 Mercedes of Manuel Matska also having a bit of a spin and an error, putting that car in the wall. out of the small carousel, which was a slow zone for a considerable period of the race then, and led to a bit of a shake-up in the order.
So we're hoping to see the Marcello car, which had just been taken out. Maxi Götz had completed his second stint, first stint of 5 laps, then a stint of 8 laps. Götz brought into the pits, and Marcello taking the car out, and it was on the out lap, albeit quite a way round the Nordschleife when he lost that wheel. And the car being recovered now. That has left the leading runners looking like this. The number 1 Audi, Dries van Toor, now at the wheel of the number 1 Leeds. It's got only 19 seconds to the second place car. That's also an Audi. Both Audi Sport Team cars. In fact, we've got an Audi Sport Team 1, 2, 3. So Haase in the number 3 and Van der Linde in the number 29 is in third. 19 seconds between first and second, and then about 2 seconds by my estimation between second and third. Back in fourth, Alexander Sims is now at the wheel of the Rover Racing BMW. That car, number 99, coming up into fourth spot. A great run from that car, just hanging onto the shirt tails of the leading cars ahead of it, and then just waiting for the race to evolve and things coming to it. As far as I can see, it may be a lap down, but that needs to be, I need that lap to just click by. Behind them in fifth, Earl Bamber, now at the wheel of the KCMG Porsche 911 car 18. In sixth, that's the number 42, Tomczyk, is at the BMW Team Schnitzer car in sixth spot, car 42. In seventh is number 5 of Phoenix Racing, that's an Audi R8. In eighth place is the number 6, Maro Engel, in the Mercedes, running 46 seconds behind that seventh spot, and then almost equidistant, another 46 seconds before we get the number 19 KCMG Porsche coming through in ninth and rounding off the top 10. These cars all, by the way, in the SP9 class, as we expected. It's the Fricadelli Racing Team Porsche 911, a further 47 seconds, almost equidistant again. Equidistant between 8th, 9th and 10th, that is. So things beginning to develop. We expect things to continually develop. And it's just...
So it looks like that front end, which had contact with the barrier the second time, has eventually given up then on the toe round for Raffaele Marcello.
Ah, that's what we're seeing.
I mean, we saw him spin once. We've certainly given him... it did look like it's absolutely confirmed that the rear tyre was not from the team, that the rear tyre was not connected to the car.
Not at all, Alex. It's just I'm putting 2 and 2 together and getting a 6. So
sure.
But hopefully I'll get 4. It's just I'm surmising that with it being an outlap, and that wheel was definitely not on the car, and I think the most likely thing is, rather than a Mercedes rear suspension breaking, there's more likelihood of a wheel not coming loose, isn't there?
Certainly is.
Or wrongly put on or something, or cross-threaded or something.
Certainly is, yeah. And you do see them come off slowly like that. That wouldn't be unusual if it just didn't make quite thread, and then it had just been unwinding, and eventually the drive pegs are just not engaging. What's confusing me is, as Dries van Toor's off as well in the number 1 Audi, as we watch them on board and Dries van Toor off in the rain, and it's raining hard out there, isn't it? It's raining absolutely hard. And Van Toor, look at Van Toor struggling with that Audi, and there's a race on now at the front with that Mercedes fallen by the wayside. Van Toor leading the race, of course, not quite idented that as he heads towards Metzgersfeld. Let's watch it again. Look how hard it's raining. And this is again in the Forest chicane. Is he going to have exactly the same? He is, you know. He's going to have exactly the same incident. Well, we gave Raffaele Marcello the benefit of the doubt. You wonder if there's something down there, and actually that tyre is effect rather than cause. I'm sure the team will give us the heads up on that, but Van Toor manages to get away with it, carries on his way. 18 seconds at the moment in front of Haase, and the first of the Van der Lindes in the 29 car. But this is going to be a massive, massive battle now in these three Audis, and you've got to wonder how much Audi are going to have to say about this.
I think it's going to reward the brave here, Alex. We're seeing a lot of spray from pretty much the whole field. A lot of standing water showing up as well, with big, huge puddles of water. I just noticed where on the track where we were overtaking one of the lower classes, and I literally couldn't see the sidewall of the front tyres because of the amount of water that's on the track.
They're filling the tread block with
really
standing water. You can see it. You can see it everywhere now. At the front of this race, though, Audi Sport Team Phoenix, Audi Sport Team Car Collection, Audi Sport Team Land. So 3 Audis, but 3 ambitious customer teams looking to make their mark on this race. How much control will Audi have over keeping these teams sensible while they lead this race 1, 2, 3?
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure, and I'd like to think I know somebody who I can ask whether I get
go on,
an
ask
accurate.
Martin.
I'm going to. Yeah, Martin, it's coming. I'm sure we're going to be. What was Lena Gade's famous saying? Push without risk. You can't push at all in these conditions. It's all a battle of survival, isn't it?
Push without risk is equivalent to the disclaimer you get given, isn't it, at the start of a dangerous activity? Whatever happens, it's not our fault, essentially.
Yeah. We need you to push and put it on the limit, and if you go off, it's your fault. Yeah. We've got quite a diverse and eclectic mix of cars, as ever, in the Nurburgring 24 hours, but it's perhaps worth mentioning we're also meeting quite a diverse driver list as well, and I must mention a British driver, Charlie Christina Martin, is in the number 242. That's the Pixum CFN Team Adrenaline Motorsport. It's in the Class Cup 5 category. She's in the M240i, which is one of my favourite cars. I think that car looks fantastic. It looks like it's doing 100 mile an hour standing still, that car. Well, Charlie is the first trans driver that we've got in the field here this weekend. British driver, very familiar to UK motorsport fans. And Charlie is a transgender. She's used her status as a prominent racing driver to raise awareness of LGBT and transgender issues and rights. She was influenced by trans model Caroline Crossy, saying that Caroline was a real trailblazer in the trans community, and she remembers it was the eureka moment of this is what I need to do, and she was only 7. So best of luck to Charlie, who, I'm just looking down the order, currently 4th in class, 65th overall, and we've got all the British fans rooting for you. Charlie Martin there in the 245 BMW.
Yeah, great to see Charlie out there. Hope she has a great race, and it's a very friendly character, and hopefully she has good fun out on the racetrack, gets a good result as well. Not best conditions for your first 24 hours of Nurburgring. It gets better, Charlie. It's not always like this, and we wish you all the best in that BMW. That's for sure. It's a battle at the front, certainly. Still shaping up between the number 1 and the number 3 as we just cut back to the action. Here's the number 1, Dries van Thor, leading the race, but Hasse behind him is not too far back as well. This is a battle for the overall lead of the Nurburgring 24 hours. And there it is then, Hasse watching Dries van Thor slide his way out of the small carousel. He wants to lead this one, and just look at the spray as they head out onto the Dottinger Her. This is motorsport on level hard with legend mode stuck on. Just absolutely incredible scenes here. Look at that. Where's the track? As they head down the Dottinger, a bit of traffic ahead. Christopher Haas pulls out of the slipstream of Dries van Thor just so he can see where he's going. I've done this, and that is about as much as you can see. If you don't believe that that's what the visibility's like, I've done it, and I can tell you it's that bad.
First race I ever did in the wet in a Formula Ford. was like that, and I instinctively lifted the visor, and it was like someone had just thrown a bucket of water into my helmet, and I literally couldn't breathe. I almost drowned. Don't try this at home. Do not try.
Has he done him? He's just done. I think Christopher Haas has just done him on the brakes into the final sector.
How did he even see where the corner was?
I think he passed him. He didn't even notice. It could well be, unless Van Thor's escaped up into that group of traffic. We won't have to wait too long to find out, because they're about to come across the line. Here it is again then. And yeah, there's the move. No, I think it was maybe the Porsche ahead. So much spray, we can't even see which car. And Van Thor has just lost out in that bit of traffic, and sorry, Haas has just lost out in that bit of traffic. Van Thor is in the next group up the road.
The visibility is bad for the drivers, and equally as bad for the commentators.
It's just
we just got white screens.
Which car is which?
White screens of spray, and you know what? I feel much safer here in our commentary booth, looking at white screens of spray than being out there with the car moving around, aquaplaning every 2 minutes. So what's the Grand Prix track going to be like? The Nordschleife we've seen is dark. It's how is the FIA Grid 1 circuit part of this track going to be reacting to the amount of water that we see dropping?
Well, you get a bit of rubber, you get a lot more rubber down on the Grand Prix circuit, but certainly it's a bit wider, there's a bit more lighting, and you get a bit of a chance to take a breath. Certainly the real challenges of this kind of condition are areas like the floodplats, the base of the foxhole, where the car will almost certainly be aquaplaning and sliding around, as we see Christopher Haas just running a little bit wide through the back chicane of the Grand Prix section. And then areas like Wipperman and Brunchen, and all the way down through the Kesselchen section into Mutkirch are just going to be almost impassable with this amount of water down. Just the bravery and skill to keep the car on the road as you chase after your teammate, absolutely immense here. You have to dance with the outside white lines of the circuit, find the grip where the rubber isn't. Look at them right around the outside of the first part of the Hatzenbach as they head through this winding section, the visibility ever worsening.
As we continue into the night though, Alex, I can see the weather not improving, certainly until the sun comes up. And Christopher Haas is off, spinning wildly as he went through a right-hander, the car just snapping away from him. Alex mentioned only a few moments ago about the tread blocks on the tyres just getting absolutely saturated and overwhelmed by the amount of water on the track. And for me, that looked exactly like that. He was hardly moving. The car just snapped away, cornering, too much water on the track, and he basically just lost that, Alex.
The final part of the Hatzenbach, and they're just struggling so much for grip. There's so much water out there. Let's see it again. It's just through this section where the road cambers away. Look, he catches that curb.
Gets on the curb, doesn't
and
he?
As he comes off the curb, there's just absolutely no purchase from the rear axle of the car whatsoever. Does well to keep it out of the Armco. Christopher Haas will have some time to make up.
Yes, hopefully he kept it out the barriers. He didn't look quite like he did. We're coming up to the top of the hour. It's we're just underneath 17 hours to go now. So with just under 17 hours to go, we've got action aplenty here at the Nurburgring 24 hours. You're listening to RS1, a channel of the RSL network. And I'm quite sure that the drama is certainly going to continue for the next 17 hours, as I thank Alex Brundle for his company in the last hour. We've had all sorts of action. I'm going to be joined by Peter Snowden any moment now, and Snowy will be hitting the ground running with the incident aplenty on the track. We're going to keep an eye on the number 3. We saw him pirouette several times. He did about a couple of 360s, Hard to see whether or not he contacted the barrier in any way. I'm not sure he did, but he got the car through the right-hander onto the, I'm sure that was just as before you go right at the floodplaats. It's very hard to see in these conditions, let alone drive racing cars around this track. And welcome back, Snowy. You were watching that, mate, and I'm not sure whether the Christopher Haase Audi did indeed contact the barriers.
No, didn't hit anything. Managed a full 360 pirouette and probably a little bit more, actually, probably even 720. Didn't hit anything. I'm not quite sure. I thought it was Hatzenbach a bit further back, but as Alex Brundle, the departing Alex Brundle departing from the commentary booth, just said, he picked up that curb on the end. It wasn't a question of just catching the curb. He generally hooked up the curb deliberately, but as Alex spotted very keenly and very astutely, it's when it came off the curb that was the problem. It unsettled the car. Using the curb, it's not really a problem. We've said this before, only yesterday Johnny Palmer and I were going through this, that in the wet, you don't want to use the curbs on the loaded wheels. Paint, curbs, wet, doesn't work. Yeah, sounds obvious. It wasn't, it was unloaded, and using the curb was no problem at all. It was coming off it just spat the back of the car around, and that was it. But on one of the narrowest parts of the circuits, Joe, 2 360s in the wet. It's missed everything. It was like a video game at high speed. And I was waiting for the impact, the bit to come off it, debris, the carbon flying up, and it didn't. He got away with it. And you know that when it came to a halt, there was a metaphorical phew from inside that car. Possibly slightly different, but something of that order.
Alex and I were speculating as to what sort of team orders, if any, were going to come into the Audi Sport Team 1, 2, 3 as it stands at the moment, albeit with 17 hours to go. I put that question to Martin Pass over the air, and Martin, thank you for getting back to us. Audi Sport entries, even though we're different teams, you can rest assured Chris Renke, head of customer racing, watching in on our mission control above the big garages, will be in conversation with Phoenix, Car Collection and Land. I'm pretty sure they will, Martin. And I'm pretty sure that things will be what we would call quite conservative. Now, we're showing a red flag. Red flag is being put out on the start-finish straight, and that is probably down to conditions on the track becoming too much, too dangerous, quite frankly. So, not the first time we've had a Nurburgring 24 hours brought to a halt with a red flag. We've had it for various reasons over the more recent years. We had a red flag for sleet and ice onto the track back in 2016, and a little bit earlier than that we had the race stopped for quite a chunk of time overnight because of thick, heavy fog. And Darren Wood, you were spot on, mate. This is going to go to a red flag if this rain continues, is what he said a few minutes ago, about 10 minutes ago. And he's been to a few Nürburgring 24 hours races himself to know what he's talking about, and he got that spot on. So, Snowy, would you agree with that? You still drive a bit. You've raced at a pretty high level. I'm sure there's no envy there when you see these conditions and how these guys and girls are going. Personally, from where I'm sitting, I think that's the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the cars are different. The level of the pace of the cars these days, it's not the same as when I was doing it back in the days when it was sepia footage, Pathé News
in black and white. Yes.
But yeah,
and commentators
as far as black and white, but haven't got as far as that.
As commentators, it's like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, but it was it's the right thing to do, even with the technological advances in lighting we've talked about already. How incredible they are, but it's the standing water. That's the big issue.
Well, we've just saw Christopher Haase, who is an outstandingly talented driver, who harmlessly put his car where he'd been putting his car lap after lap after lap, using the curb on the right, and then the car just snapped away. And that, for me, is when the conditions are becoming inconsistent. The drivers are doing what they've been doing pretty much the whole race. We've had rain. But now the track conditions are that the inconsistency in the track conditions and standing water and the amount of standing water is just too much for this race to continue in a safe fashion. So we've put the red flag out. We're going to halt it for a little bit. We're just going to gather our thoughts, and I'm pretty sure the weather's going to change. I'm not sure how long this rainstorm is forecast for, and we'll get onto our weather satellite. But as you heard Alex Brundle say, the Nordschleife area and the Eifelrennen, where it meets with the Ardennes, it's one big, huge forest between Belgium, across the Belgium-German border, isn't it?
Not for the first time in my life, I'm going to say something that I might regret. If John Hindhoff's listening, don't sack me, John, but every time I get in the commentary booth, the leading car goes out. Just a thought. 2 Mercedes now,
well,
2 stints.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the entertainment business.
Strike that off. It didn't happen.
Sports commentary, that's why we love live sport, because we don't know what's going to happen next. And you know what? Coming into this, when I saw the weather forecast last week and it was going to be a wet race, I just knew that the contention, the controversy, the incident rate was going to be sky high. And Steve Tarrant tweets, this is a 24-hour race. This is 24-hour racing with steroids. Yes, you're right, Steve, it is. This is absolute Ironman motorsport, because every driver out there, and I'm not just talking about the SP9 class, I'm talking about the people down the field in all of our classes, no matter what car you were driving out there, it is the ultimate challenge in bravery and skill. Doesn't matter whether you're in an Opel Astra, a Golf GTI, or a GT3, Mercedes, Audi, Porsche. It is very, very courageous and brave to race these cars around the Nordschleife in these conditions.
It is, but there's the risk over reward. There's no point in when the risk is too great. There's no point when you're starting to have major things like that happening. Not just because it's a lead car. Doesn't matter if you say there's 23 classes of cars out there, and nearly 100 cars out there. So there's a whole variety. It's not just car. We focus on the leading cars in front because it's so easy, because we're gullible, so we follow the quick ones, don't we? We watch it. It's where all the action is. It's not where all the action is, where it's obvious, but there's action all the way down through the field, and it's those guys in the 240i's or the TCR or whatever, the Caymans, they're trying just as hard in their own particular category as we are. We just focus on the SP9 group, the GT3 cars, because they're at the sharp end. It's obvious, but it's just the same for all those other guys on those 240i's. It's just an accident at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour. It's still an accident at 100 miles an hour.
Especially here.
Especially here. And it doesn't really matter if you're in an R8 Audi or a GT3 Mercedes or a 240i or a Cayman or a Golf GTI for that matter.
Yeah.
And there are many other makes of vehicle available for this race, of course. Other brands are available, products. But no, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Organisers, and we don't want that on the conscience or something.
It just spoils the race.
Exactly.
It spoils the race. We're losing, we've already lost some of our main contenders, early leaders, like you said, and it just spoils the race. So for now, we'll take a pause.
Just
and we'll keep your tweets coming, hashtag N24RSL. And Mike Nash asks, will the red flag period help Marciello, who is in the number 9 Mercedes, of course, who we saw lose a wheel? I'm receiving reports that car has been recovered back to Parc Fermé, which means that that's a retirement. So Marciello is going to be in the retirement list, I'm afraid.
Now, interestingly, Joe, just looking at my basic weather forecast, and I'm sure there are people that have got far better systems than I've got, but one I've relied on for a little while now, but the precipitation of this rain, 99%, is continuing through unabated until
99% precipitation.
Yes. Yeah, until 5 o'clock in the morning. The next slot between 5 and 8, it reduces to 97%, so it eases off slightly. However, around about 8 o'clock until 11, it comes down to 70 and falls dramatically then. 11 till next 3 hour slot until 11 till 2, which is virtually the end of the race. It is only 15% chance of rain.
Hang on a minute. It's only 20 to 11 in Germany at the moment, and we've got 99% chance of the rain at this rate going till 5 a.m.
Correct.
and then only reducing by a couple of percent.
Just on that, well, the first bit, and then suddenly dropping dramatically. That's my point.
Right.
Dramatically dropping to just 15% chance by 3 hours from the end of the race.
I'm pretty sure.
It's going to be a sprint, basically. Tomorrow lunchtime, there's going to be a sprint to the end.
Well, I'm just thinking
that 8:08 lap will happen.
I'm just thinking, Snowy, that I'm hoping that I'm pretty sure the race organisers will have a better weather forecasting satellite than Snowy's iPhone. But who knows? They may not. Those two, they may be going off the BBC weather app. It's not the BBC weather app.
Exactly.
It's not, is it?
You've just dished it being off Snowy's iPhone. I'll have you know, that is from Mr. Alan Hyde, who directly has the one that Mr. Alan Gow of Touring Cars, Toka, uses, and he apparently has gone through, I think it was 20 apps, he reckoned, before he'd got the one that he thought was appropriate to follow touring cars. And the man organises touring cars, so it has a little bit more. The medium might be an iPhone.
Alan Gow can organise the weather to suit his touring car races.
Precisely. So it's his app. So
I've had Alan Gow saying...
You disaway, but...
I've had Alan Gow saying a driver's briefing, if this race gets boring, I am putting a pace car out. I've had that.
That's power, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's just control.
Well, it is his series.
Well, exactly. That's my ball, and I'll do what I want. Exactly. So, cars back into the pit lane now. Wow. I did say about 3 hours ago that we had not one, not two, not three, but 4 Audis in 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th place, yes?
Yes, we did.
And I did say, watch the march of the Audis. I didn't for a minute mean that I wanted or expected or anticipated, predicted, any term you want to use, that the 2 Mercedes at the front would have problems, go out, anything. Not at all. I just said, or we said, I think it was Johnny Palmer and I at the time, just watch those Audis. Watch the march of the Audis.
Yeah.
John Hindhaugh and I had exactly this on the last race here in this kind of series, as in the 6-hour race, NLS. I know this isn't part of that, but we know full well it's a setup for it. The Ferrari might have led, that octane Ferrari, the 126 Ferrari that Luke Ludwig put on pole and Kier started, it wasn't Hirsch started it, and got into the lead at the start of this race. We saw that then, that the Audis, it was the Audis that came through, and John spotted it, unsurprisingly, with his experience on the last race. They're coming through. Don't discount the Audis. Don't discount the team squad. Never account, exactly the point. And they did, but it went down to the 6-hour race. Went down to the last lap with the Ferrari starting the last lap in the lead, and then he had to back off, and we were talking sometimes 25, 30 seconds backing off per sector on that last lap. He was having that much to fuel save it, and we realised, of course, what he's having to do was fuel save it. He had to give up the race win, but he had to save enough fuel to manage to stay on the podium, so they had to forgo and let the 2 Audis come through. Audi teams, what you say, never, ever discount them. Sure enough, not in the circumstances I would have expected or predicted, or certainly not would have wanted for either of those Mercedes cars at the front, but they're both out now, and we've got 1, 2, 3 Audis out there in the pits, admittedly now, right at the top of the field. Teams, Audi Sport Team, Audi Sport Team, Audi Sport Team. Van Tor, Van der Linde and Haas.
And I mean, the first Mercedes in the field is now down in 8th, and that's Maro Engel in the number 6.
Well, not in that car though, was he? He was pole position man, but not in that car.
That's right. Ben Stevenson tweets in, thanks Ben, that's the most sensible call to have been made. It's been marginal for the last hour, and the last few close calls show how dangerous it could be, and glad everyone is okay. Corey Marvin tweets, this is unbelievable, the red flag shows and racing has come to a complete stop for safety reasons. I hope the rain stops and we get back to racing as soon as possible. I think we all concur with that. What are the regulations regarding the red flag and parc fermé from Nikolai B? And that is a good question. We're seeing cars in the pits now. They are receiving very limited attention from what I can gather.
I think that's a different. That's an answer to a different question there. The question was, what are the rules with parc fermé?
Yes.
As in, can cars come out of the parc fermé now and rejoin? No, I don't think so.
Oh, I didn't think that.
That's sorry, that was my interpretation.
No, my interpretation is red flag. Are we now in parc fermé?
No, because the race hasn't ended.
But under red flag, some series, when the red flag goes, the cars are corralled in Parc Fermé. That isn't the case here.
Yeah, but I think that's probably because of percentage of race distance covered, whereas here we're only a fraction into a 24-hour race. Let's face it, the rules for the 24-hour race are slightly different because of the length of the race. So I would suspect, no, they're basically under pit rules now. They're just pitted, you can work on the car. What it does mean is, of course, you've got such a longer time in the pit, it's negated, it's neutralised for everybody. So anybody has got a problem, anybody's going like, this wasn't doing so well, or that was a problem, or this, they've got much longer time in the pits now to sort it out, because they're not in race, they're not on a race position where they've got to get the car back out quickly. They've got the same time as anybody else, but they're not under Parc Fermé. So it's that kind of halfway house.
Well, we're going to be able to do things like brake servicing. We're going to be able to change discs and pads, which is something that we would see perhaps with about 10 hours of racing, 11 hours of racing, and then potentially when the daylight breaks, we could see another change of discs and pads. So that's going to push that window further towards
totally
the
different
flag.
Strategy, because now you suddenly have the potential to do a whole load more servicing, as you said, that you wouldn't do at this part of the race. You wouldn't consider you'd do it if you had to.
So it's been an eventful race, with the start occurring in very, very heavy rain conditions, which, to be honest, haven't really fared up to any great extent, and track conditions absolutely atrocious to start the race. It was a very slippery first lap for everyone. The Grand Prix Strecker is, of course, being described by Alex Brundle as being very, very slippery indeed in comparison to the Nordschleife. We had a relatively clean start to the race, didn't really see any incidents starting to develop, and everyone was very sensible in the circumstances. However, sensible and racing drivers are not sometimes the words that you would put together, and it wasn't very long before we saw the number 9 Mercedes move into the lead ahead of the Ferrari, and then followed very quickly by the number 4 Mercedes, who joined in the party. And in fact, very early in that first lap was when we saw that. We've had incident aplenty though, and cars that were very much in contention for a very good result here at the Nurburgring, albeit over a very long distance. We seem to have lost. We've lost the number 4 Mercedes going off and making contact with the barrier. Before that, we lost the 100 Rover Racing BMW in strange circumstances, where the car spun off on a slippery surface, had superficial damage from first assessment, was then pulled out of harm's way behind the barrier, but then a delayed recovery of that car has put that car right out of contention and is indeed a possible retirement. Later on in the race, we then saw the number 9 only a few short minutes ago. Oil put down by the Lamborghini. It's I'm not sure whether the oil was from the Lamborghini, and there we see it was indeed from the Lamborghini.
It went off in its own oil, didn't it?
So the Lamborghini confirmed to have lost gearbox oil, much to the chagrin of Franz Conrad. They were going ever so well, and for all the Lamborghini fans out there, we lost one of the main contenders, the car returning on a flatbed. Never a good sight to see any race car returning to the pits on a flatbed, engine cover off the car so that the driver could see. The number 9 Mercedes of Fabian Schiller then continued in the lead, and the car was later taken over by Maxi Goetz, who then did a couple of stints, first of 5 laps. The second stint, a longer 8-lap stint for Maxi. He then handed the car to his teammate Rafael Marciello, who took the car out, and the car on its out lap lost a rear wheel, and that has put that car out with damage that occurred of having lost the wheel. The car spun off, hit the barrier, and subsequent damage from that caused the car to become a retirement as it was being recovered around the rest of the track.
Despite the red flag being a good few minutes ago, we still haven't got all the cars back into the pits.
No.
Quite a bit. Last of the cars are on the Dottinger now, and we'll be coming up to Tiergarten, and some of the only front-running car there being number 2 Yama Berman Mercedes, the car that went out in qualifying, had a big accident at the front end of that car. We believe it had to be rebuilt via a new chassis to take part in the race. And those cars just coming back now to the pit to say they're on the dotting home now. We're with this very shortly, so we'll have our full complement of the race cars that are running out on track. Will be back in with us. We have.
I'll quickly come in with a few tweets, yep. Snowy, while you
sure.
gather that. Sam Pierce, he agrees. You could see the red flag coming, especially after the Haas spin. He's. I will now admit I'm happy to be in front of the TV with a glass of wine and not returning to a flooded tent on the travel destination campsite. Every driver out there currently an absolute legend. Yes, we concur with that, and I'm pretty sure if you were in one of our travel destination campsites, you'd be sleeping in a sponge-like thing. Marcel Duke confirms no parc fermé. You can change your engine if you want. Not a bad idea, really. Might have time to do that. Considering the weather forecast, might have time to do that. Wally Ends, you're making it worse, Snowy. I'm not really. Blame Snowy's iPhone. Hashtag blame Snowy's iPhone. It's all your iPhone's fault, Snowy.
Thank you.
Yes, you've really depressed everybody. If this rain's going to continue till 5 a.m.
I'm just telling the truth. That's all. Thank you for being my agent there, Joe.
Yeah.
Feel so much better about that one. For bookings for Peter Snowden, see Joe Bradley. Appearing one night only. Thanks very much.
Yeah, Josh Barrett tweets, looks like nothing will happen for a while. Next update in 30 minutes. Stay tuned, of course. Thanks for that, Josh. So 30 minutes, definitely, and we'll see what the track conditions are going to be like in 30 minutes. So the first review of track conditions. You know what? This is kind of the epitome of 2020. The year started off like this, and the year 2020 went to absolute rats when, with about 50 minutes before we landed at Dubai, me, Johnny, Nick were on a plane. I forget who else was on the plane with us. Bruce, probably. The lights came on and the pilot said, well, everybody, it's at this point in the flight that I'd like to tell everyone that we're about 50 minutes away from landing in Dubai. However, I can't, but what I can tell you is that we're about 50 minutes away from landing in Istanbul. So instead of landing in Dubai, we were handbrake turn and back to Istanbul because of some shenanigans going on with US missile bases over Iran airspace. So we ended up getting to Dubai a full day late and hitting the ground running. And then during the race, as if that wasn't sort of an odd start of the 2020 season, then during the race at 10 p.m, we had torrential rain in the Middle East to the extent that it flooded the track. It didn't just flood the track, it flooded the paddock, it flooded the pits.
Well, I remember.
It flooded the media centre.
I wasn't there, but you obviously, as ever, were sending me photographs and stuff, whatever. And I remember seeing this update. I got live updates at home. But the iPhone did have a use in those days. The weather forecast wasn't so good, clearly. I know that bit. We won't cover that one again. Thank you very much. But I remember you sending me the photographs of this is not just the pit lane, but also the garages in the Dubai garages.
Yeah, underwater.
And they weren't up to the hubs of the wheel, but they were significantly up the diameter of a wheel, deep in water. Way below. You wouldn't open the door of some of these race cars because water would flood in.
On the pit straight, because of the camber of the road, the cars that were parked towards and when you stop a Creventic race on a red flag, it is parc fermé, not like it is here at the N24. The cars that were parked nearest the pit wall were under enough water that if you opened the door, I mean, race cars, even TCR cars, even saloon cars in our TCE categories, they run so low that the water was so high they would have flooded the cars. So they all had to be pushed in the middle of the night. So that's 20. I don't need to remind anybody else how the rest of 2020 is gone.
No,
but here we are racing. We had a great Daytona 24 hours. We had a great Le Mans 24 hours last week, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And here we are at the Nurburgring, and we have a red flag because of rain. Now, this isn't as much a surprise, red flagging a race at the Nurburgring for rain, as it was in Dubai. But this, for me, just epitomises it. And I tell you what does epitomise it is your weather forecast. 5 a.m. We can't wait that long.
Well, we might have to.
Let's get the brushes out.
To use an old, it is what it is. And it's a red flag. It is raining. It is also, you just described all those great races of 2020 so far, or last year and this year. It's also a great Nurburgring 24-hour. Just on top of everything else, it's just a little bit unbelievable.
Yes.
I just think, going back to what you're saying about the Dubai 24-hour earlier this year, January, am I right? Yes, January.
Yeah.
And you're saying, all the things we've discussed this, Johnny and I in particular, because we've done the first 2 days of this, but Johnny and I were discussing earlier, the things that go through a driver's mind, or things that a driver has to deal with during a 24-hour race. All the possible variations, weather, tyre degradation, traffic, all sorts of things. That's just touching, just scraping the surface. That surface is so full of water that your race gets stopped, a bit like we've got here. But you're talking about Dubai, where it's going to be above the sill height if you open the door. Can you imagine having to tell your driver as he's coming around to park up, don't open the door?
Yes.
You know, that radio message, do not open the car. Box this lap, do not open the car door. And you'd be on the radio going, sorry? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to mention a few people. Corey Marvin, he's checked he's checked for us, and the Nurburgring 24 hours has been red flagged at least 7 or 8 times over the years. I remember 2.
Well, it's only in 50. It's only in 50 runnings of it. There's not that many times.
Yeah, considering where we are as well,
exactly.
Geographically.
It's actually quite a small percentage.
Ian McCarthy's made me laugh, as has Nikolai B. Ian McCarthy, well, I'm not often happy to see the red flag come out. That was nervous viewing for a while there. My couch was beginning to understeer. Good call, but hoping for an earlier restart than 5. Yeah, absolutely. You made me laugh there. Nikolai B. My couch nearly went off. It had now forced. Yeah, so everybody feeling the tension.
I've got a coffee table like that.
Sorry, I misread that. Thomas Roth, thanks for clearing that. The update isn't in 30 minutes. It's at 0:30. That's 90 minutes from now.
An hour and a half away.
If anyone can clarify that, I read that as an update in 30 minutes, but Thomas Roth has interpreted that as an update at 0:30. Right, Jackie Warnock is with us.
Jackie Warnock, yeah, from Australia. Hi, Jackie.
In Australia.
She did say morning, chaps.
Our social media manager at times, and I think possibly now.
And leg end.
Yeah, Josh Barrett says 0:30 hours local time, not 30 minutes. So not even in. So they're not good. It's not. It's because of Snowy's forecast. Josh is saying.
I have a word with Josh.
With Snowy's forecast, you kind of wonder whether there'll be any running before daylight.
That's what I was thinking. That's kind of where I was going. See, so Josh,
yes.
not as mad as you think, Josh.
Yes. So right. I think with that interpretation being coming at us twice, I think that is an update with regards to track conditions coming at 11. Sorry, it's 30 minutes past midnight, German time, 23:30 hours in the UK. So
still 90 minutes away.
So still, yeah, doesn't make it any better, does it? No.
Doesn't matter, it's still 90 minutes away.
Thank you, everybody, for tweeting that in.
Somewhere in the world. So one of the Audis there having a lot of work done. I mean, just got a little bit of footage from garage here. Now, it's interesting, you were saying about gearbox changes, engine changes. You were saying it's not under part for me, you can do what you like. Well, there's an Audi here having a gearbox change. Joe, I think it's potentially, it might be the number 1 car, actually, the Vantol car. I'm just going to have a quick look on that in a minute, but I think that car might be having its gearbox change. Certainly one of the Audis is having a gearbox change. Perfect time to do it. And I reckon it's the number 1 car. I reckon it's the Phoenix. Could be the Phoenix car.
We'll see if we can get an ID on that. On
well, they
that
were doing lots of work on the side of it. We saw one of the previous pit stops. That car had some floor damage on the side, and it was Alex Brundle picked up on that very quickly, that he didn't want the floor laminating, separating, etc., etc. He used very clever terms like laminating, like falling off in my eyes, or coming apart. But what they were doing was they had a little air gun, rather like you have at the dentist, or when they vacuum all the sort of saliva and bits away from your mouth. A little gun blowing air off, because obviously the track was wet, drying the side of that car so they could put some glue on it, and then put some, of course, what you need on a race car to make it go quicker, tank tape. You've got to have a bit of tank tape on it. Had to. It wasn't quick enough, so it needed some tank tape down at the bottom. Nice. Notice though, it was black, colour coded.
You see, the thing is, Snowy, you have to have a collection of tank tape and of the colour of the car that you're running. So if you're running a number of cars that are all a different colour, like a blue one, a red one, a yellow one, you would have to have a stock. And if any of my crew brought out the yellow tank tape for the blue car, they'd be sent back. They'd be sent packing it. Bring out the blue tank tape. I can't find it. The yellow will have to do. We do love a bit of wet weather, but not too much wet weather, Snowy. I've always found the weather to be a great leveller.
It's great fun racing in the wet.
I tell you what, I know I've told this story before in our broadcast, but I'm sure you haven't heard this. Did I ever tell you when we won and made history in 750 Motor Club Motorsport with Martin Byford and the Gateshead College race team? That
yes.
I haven't told you, have I?
Yeah, I have. I've just forgotten.
Oh well.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm being polite.
So
I said I forgot. I think I glazed over.
You know when you get, you probably did. Yeah, you probably fell asleep on it. Yeah.
Well, hey, you've done enough of those. When I've told you stories, you've done enough, understandably. So it's only fair.
Formula Ford Z-Tech, right? Class C of 750 Motor Club Formula 4 meeting. Class A are Formula 3 cars of downforce, slicks and wings, Formula 3 cars, all at the front of the grid. And Martin Byford was the driver. Now, the reason Martin Byford was the driver was because he's a very able driver, and he was also very cheap, as in for nothing, because it was for a good cause. We were teaching a bunch of students just after having left school. They've gone through a college course.
It's a pretty brilliant driver to place in the car,
isn't it? Just
absolutely got the pace,
yes,
and cheap.
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
driver. Sign him up.
Perfect driver.
Yep.
Martin's a great guy. And he's a good friend. And so we get to a point where we qualify. I think it was something like 4 or 5 seconds quicker than the next Class C car. And Josh Barrett actually found the video of this for us not so long ago. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, it's wet, dry, and the race is red flagged. Very similar to what we've got now. And we're waiting in Parc Fermé while they sort the track out and rebuild the barriers, where some unfortunate soul has gone off and smashed up their Formula 3 car. And it starts to rain. So Martin and I quickly put on the wets. And then it dries up. And it's one of those Norfolk days where the sun comes out from behind the rain cloud and immediately dries the track. So we put the car back on the slicks. Now, because it's Parc Fermé, I wasn't allowed any crew in. So I'm the crew, me and Martin and I. We're jacking the front of the car up, jacking the back of the car up, putting the wheels on, taking the wheels off, slicks on, wets on, slicks on, wets on. Gets to the 4th change and it downpours. And then the sun comes out. So I turn to Martin and I say, mate, if that black cloud comes across here and douses this track when we go racing, we're going to win this race. I said, we are going to win this class no matter what, even if it stays dry and we stay on the wets, because all you'll do is ruin the wets. So Martin, I think the decision was a tactical decision on Martin's case. On my case, I was just knackered and didn't have the energy to change the wheels and tyres again. So he went out and lines up on the grid. In front of him are all these Class B Formula 3 cars. And as we went round on the green lap, it started to rain. And on the first lap, he came by in 3rd. On the second lap, he came by in 2nd. I know I'm probably getting the details slightly wrong, but it's
don't spoil the story. It's fine.
And he went on to win the race in the wet. a Class C car winning a Formula 4 750 Motor Club event, overall winners, because all the Formula 3 cars who were on slicks just couldn't get the grip. That's my wet weather story. What wet story have you? Wet weather. Did I say wet weather? Or did I say weather wet? What wet weather story? You must have some wet weather stories from racing, Snowy.
I could tell you one that involves a certain...
That is broadcastable, I mean.
Former British GT and FIA GT champion.
Yes.
Who I think you mentioned earlier on. Somebody thought you were lip reading his name when you said David Drinkwater, and Johnny Palmer thought you were saying Jamie Campbell-Walter.
He did, yes. Yes.
Well, of that certain gentleman, Spa 24 hour race again. You see, not even just a wet race story, a 24-hour wet race story. Spa 24 hour 2003. 20 hours of biblical rain like this. They didn't red flag it, okay? We didn't in those days, okay? So, we have a certain Formula 1 test driver who's driving a Lister Storm in qualifying and damages it quite quickly, gets sacked by the team. We won't go into that one, that's a whole different story, not for broadcasting. Jamie Campbell-Walter starts at the back of the grid, 54th in those days, that's all there was on the grid. Yeah, it came through by 10 o'clock, we get quarter points at 10 o'clock, yes? 6 hours into the race. And Jamie Campbell-Walter is already third. And I'm sitting right behind him in a Viper. And it is wet. It is proper wet. To the point of there is a river of water running across the top of Radion. Top of Eau Rouge, yeah?
Really?
Now, those of you who remember motor racing in those days, the GT cars, those Lister Storms, they were black with a big sign down the side saying Storm written at an angle, so almost 45 degrees down the side of the car, yeah? One lap, I'm sitting there behind him, and I see the word Storm, which is on the passenger door. It's on both doors. It's on that door. And I'm thinking, probably shouldn't see that much of the car. It was that much of a twitch, okay? So to the point where do you know what? I nearly lifted off, okay? But you're sitting thinking, that's pretty sideways, Jamie. I know he's a stellar driver. I know he's a world champion. I know, but boy, and he's actually done really well to recover that. So I'm sitting there in the moment, enjoying driving this Viper around, thinking, I'm just an absolute masterclass from Jamie Campbell-Walter. Yep. Next lap, red lights, white lights, red lights, white lights. I don't mean red lights at the side of the track. I mean car headlights, tail lights. Off he goes. I think 2003 was the first year of the new pit exit at Spa being built. I'm sure that was the year that was the first time it was done. Yeah. And off it goes. Over to the exit, top of Radion. Used to be at the bottom of Eau Rouge, the exit. So, naturally, as a driver, your first thought is, oh, get into position. Second thought is, hope he's okay. Safety car comes up by the time we get to the come around, gone, completely cleared. You think, they've cleared that pretty quickly. Have they, though? No, they haven't cleared it. What's happened is Jamie's gone off and collected the barriers at the marshal post on the pit exit backwards. The car has then looped over into the woods. Wow. So he's actually vaulted the barriers and parked a Lister Storm GT1 car on its wheels, a bit like Peter Dunbrack, it landed on its wheels, yeah? Unperturbed by this, because Jamie being this kind, I hope, Jamie, if you're listening, I'm sure you won't mind me telling this story. Jamie then has a conversation with the team owner, Lawrence Pierce. Word to the effect of, Lawrence, I've just rolled it at the top of Eau Rouge, but I'm bringing it in. He doesn't realise he's actually vaulted the barriers. He's on the wrong side of the track in the woods. Yeah. Got a bit of arm cable tuning, can't quite do it. He's jabbing the starter motor. Lawrence, in his inimitable start, and this is not broadcastable, suggested that it would be wise if he didn't bring the car in, because there wasn't a lot of the back end left, like the dry sump tanks, etc., etc. Yeah. They have a row, which wasn't uncommon. Jamie gets out of the car in temper, having survived rolling a GT1 car at the top of Eau Rouge. Just think about that. Yeah. Survives that completely, opens the door, steps out in temper, completely forgets to disconnect his water bottle and his radio line, pulls his head back, twists his ankle getting out of the car.
No way.
Absolutely true story. Absolutely true. Spa 2003. There you go.
That is funny. Peter Fry, who's listening in from home in the Netherlands. Peter Fry, one of the our good friends and staff of our Creventic races, just sent me a lovely picture of Dubai, and he's in the paddock up to his knees in water. I hope you're well, Peter, and hopefully this crazy year will indeed start calming down and allowing us to get back to a track somewhere. Word is that it hasn't. Oh, sorry. Word is it hasn't stopped raining at the Nurburgring, so we're still a little bit while off. This has given the teams, as we suspected,
well,
Snowy, we did say full service. What I've just seen there on the Hyundai, didn't catch the number, is a full alignment going on the whole car. So we had the corner weights, the car's being corner weighted, and they're having an alignment check on the four wheels and setting the toe and the tracking at the front and back of the car, and just basically resetting the car to back to where its optimum setup was.
Because only two of the Hyundais in the car in the race. That's the 830 and 831. That's the
didn't see which one
TCR cars. That's the I-130 or the Velociter. So what I did spot as well was that I had got it just right. Of course, it was the colour. I should have given it away to me pretty often when I thought about it. The number one car, the Audi Sport Team car that was actually leading, I think, when it came in, driven by Dries Van Tor at the time. That car, they're taking what we were talking about, saying change the engine. Well, I haven't gone that far, but they're changing the gearbox on that car. Never mind, they were taping the side up as well. But as I said to you, we were talking about that floor delamination that Alex Brundle was referring to on the previous session a couple of hours ago, saying yes, to just make sure that doesn't delaminate and the floor comes away, sets up all sorts of things, ruins the aero, etc., etc. As the camera went round to the back of it, there's a brand spanking new gearbox sitting there in a crate. I'm sure Audi don't use crates anymore, well, not wood anyway, but you know what I mean. Probably Aston Martin still do, probably made of ash. But well, that's a Morgan, isn't it? But they're putting a brand new gearbox on that number one Audi Sport car as we speak.
Let's have a rundown of our class leaders while we've got this delay going on. Firstly, I'll give you a rundown of the top 10 overall, who are all SP9 runners. We've got an Audi Sport Team 1, 2, 3, car number 1 with Dries Van Tor at the wheel at the stoppage, leading. Car 29, Kelvin van der Linde at the wheel of that one, is in second. And then Christopher Hasse, who kind of caught the attention of the race director, I'm pretty sure, with that more than 2 360 pirouettes. Snowy?
Joe, can I add a tiny bit of Audi bit in there? We've just seen a little bit of footage in the garage there, just as you're talking of those Audi Sport cars 1, 2 and 3. 10 minutes ago, I suggested it looked like they focused on a new gearbox in a crate. That gearbox that was in that Audi is now off it already. 10 minutes ago, that was on the car. It's now off it already, and a new one's going on.
Well, I was there to witness the Audi R8 prototype that Audi built. And because the Le Mans this is the car that would have raced at Le Mans in the Le Mans 24 hours. And the way that Audi designed that R8 brought about a regulation change to Le Mans rules. I know we're digressing off N24 rules, but we are watching. If you are watching on the stream, we are seeing a gearbox change taking effect on one of the Audis. Did we get the number on that?
Number one. The
number one. So that's the leading car.
The leading car.
Leading car now going in for a gearbox change.
It's the green one.
But we saw a gearbox change on an Audi R8, and I was there at the pit garage to see it in 4 minutes. And basically, from behind the engine, it was all modular. Behind the engine, everything was, the gearbox came off with the rear suspension.
It had a zip on it, on the bell housing, didn't it?
Not quite, pretty similar to a zip. But basically, everything attached to the gearbox, which was, of course, the suspension, gearbox and engine being a stress member, was removed. And I think it was 4 minutes. It was something crazy. And what that enabled Audi to do was basically do a gearbox change under full course caution. And that was just then a checkbook battle. And Audi, Volkswagen Audi, the VW group, was able to just design that car into being able to have a full gearbox change. Now, that brought about a regulation change which stipulated that you must finish the race with the same gearbox casing. So that meant that if the internals of the gearbox damaged themselves, you couldn't just change the whole rear end of the car. You would have to change the internals of the gearbox, which takes a lot longer than 4 minutes. But that's incredible. Now, the Audi the R8 LMS that we are seeing GT3 specification, albeit it wasn't 4 minutes, Snowy, but how long was that? 10?
Yeah, say 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Less than 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes and it's off. I know that's not 4 minutes for a whole change because they've done that in 2 minutes off, 2 minutes on, in 4 minutes roughly there. But as you said there, quite rightly, Joe, just going back to the design of that, the design of this Audi R8 LMS sitting there in the pit box, having that gearbox change done with an Aston right behind it being worked on as well. So mechanics there from opposing teams all getting each other, trying to get each other, not a lot of legroom there going on, all working away with their masks on, quite rightly, on this car. But that Audi R8 LMS, rear wings on it, all the lights are mounted at the back. All they've done is taken the engine cover off and the rear bumper, access to panel there, straight to the gearbox. As actually said, by design. So it's there, they can go in, undo that zip around the bell housing, as I've mentioned already. Obviously it carries off to these R8s. I'm joking, but metaphorically, it's that quick. Gearbox out, goes back in again. Don't have to change any wing settings, don't upset the car at all. Obviously the suspension's all pre-done and preset on that gearbox. They lift it up. In fact, the way it's an advantage to have the suspension on it, because a mechanic either side picks up the wishbones and the discs and the brake assembly. Either side picks it up with the gearbox in the middle. It's actually perfect handles. So that's what they're technically their secondary use. Suspension, because they're actually really gearbox handles when they do a gearbox change.
Gearbox
they
handles,
pick it up
I like
each
that.
side, click it on. They happen to then have a primary use of being suspension with the brakes on the end of it. But absolutely fantastic work there from the Audi Sport team, popping that onto the number one car. The car said that came in driven by Dries van Toor when that car came in, and obviously no idea on starting order. So I've got no idea on starting at the moment where they're going to go out again. Obviously this race will have to recommence at some point. But rain is forecast to pretty heavily through the night that I've got. I know we now have a new campaign of Blame Snowy going, I understand, from Joe looking on the Twitter feed.
Well, you were the one who, you know, Dr. Doom and Gloom. It's going to rain. It's going to rain hard, 90% chance of raining hard until 5 a.m., reducing to 97% till 8 a.m. Oh, wonderful!
No, I didn't say that. You know, if you're going to quote the information, get it right. Come on. I didn't say that. I said, but in the morning, by 70% down to 15% by the end of the race. It's quite late, hard through the night. All I did, I don't understand in broadcasting how quoting facts is gloom and doom.
I've got a question for you.
Oh, here we go.
Stein Raceboy, I think that's how you pronounce that, is it? S-T-I-J-N?
Yes.
Stein Raceboy. That F1 driver that got sacked, I don't know who he means by this, but it's in relation to your Lister Storm story, sold himself to Lawrence Pierce, telling him that he was the best driver in the world. His excuse for the crash was that the Lister was a right-hand drive car.
Fantastic.
Who's that then?
Am I allowed to say?
I don't know.
Baz Linders. Oh, it's out there now.
Oh, right, you said it then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great story. Thanks,
it was also on damp conditions and his first flying lap of qualifying, and he was understandably trying to beat Jamie Campbell-Walter's time in the car, and it did end up down the escape road at La Source.
Yeah,
with a lot of the front end missing. I think that was one of Lawrence's points in using fairly Anglo-Saxon rhetoric to Mr. Campbell-Walter, that a certain Belgian Minardi F1 test driver, like Linders, so it's quite under his breath, had destroyed the front end of the car. Jamie had now destroyed the rear end of the car. There wasn't a Anglo-Saxon part of much of the car left.
Yes,
that was roughly the gist of the story. I think the roof was fairly intact.
Good team effort.
It was, yeah.
Nikolai B it confirms what we've already established, but I want to add this with regard. Confirms what we already know about Parc Fermé rules on the lack thereof in red flag situations in the N24. In years past, cars have been recovered at the pits. Last year, he's reminding me about this. We saw that. I think it was the all-girl crew as well, the all-female crew, which is here this year as well. I'm not sure if it's the same all-female crew, but they did replace an engine during the race. Basically anything goes. Look, the principles behind it, the spirit of the race is that if you can get the car back to the pits and repair it, then get back out there. It's very similar to the 24H series in that, with regards to that rule.
I always understood, and obviously it changes for different circuits and different organisers, different users, as you've just pointed out, Joe, from Le Mans a week ago in France, from the ACO to the 24-hour ADAC, but I always understood that the principles were that the same chassis that starts a race must finish it, the same engine block, gearbox casing and axle casing. Now sometimes these gearbox axle can be the same thing as in the Audi transaxle car. It's a bit different there, but the principles, so it is what you're saying, some of the internals. Now in this race, we're clearly seeing that the Audi Sport team car number 1 is having an entire gearbox placement. That, of course, is, by the way, in the car now already. Just a matter of 10 minutes later, that car has got its gearbox back on position, and unions and oilways and various bits of ancillaries and connections, and all the umbilical bits are being connected to that gearbox, so that car will be ready to rejoin with a fresh gearbox going out. This is the number 1 car, and also happens to be the number 1 position, P1 leading car as it was when it came in. 39 laps of the race were completed before we got onto the red flag. It wasn't quite the quickest car on the track. The 9:15.5 that number 1 Audi had done, but the fastest car on the track was indeed Martin in the number 31 car. That was a 9-minute 12.4, and that, of course, being the Fricadelli Racing Porsche 911. I said the Porsches came into their own in the wet, and the Fricadelli Racing Team car there, that was piloted at that point by Maxime Martin, Belgian driver, popping that car into the fastest lap of the race so far, a 9:12.4. And before Johnny Palmer joins in, I'm sure he's going to have a little giggle somewhere in the booth when he can hear me saying this. I'm sure I'll probably get a message in a minute. My predicted forecast, however it is, not weather forecast, but my lap time forecast of an 8-minute 8 being probably the fastest lap of the race, or qualifying, I thought would happen. I thought that may well happen. He was still anticipating that. We're a little way off that with 9-minute 12, but I did say it was in the dry, which Johnny conveniently forgets to mention at the end of his sentence that I did mention it would be in the dry. That would be the dry, not so wet that it's been red flagged. Slight difference.
Yeah, I think so. Andrew Mather sort of supports Audi team's idea of changing gearbox and transmission. Obviously, we don't know how many kilometres is on the gearbox. I'm not even sure Martin Pass could find that out for us. If he can, he'll surely message me. But obviously, fatigue and damage on the gears is common. It's the fact that you use the car, it's gonna take wear, and of course they are covering their bases towards the finish. Thanks, Andrew. What else would you change, Snowy, that you think? I certainly would do brakes. I like the Hyundai's team idea of resetting the geometry, because we don't know how much contact that car's had, and it's a TCR car, and I've run touring cars, and that wheel-to-wheel contact might look harmless on TV and make for good entertainment, but the rest of the race you are basically running around with a car that is towing out or towing in too far, and it knocks the handling all over.
It's a great question, Joe, and I would take a slightly different view on it. I'd be intrigued to have Alex Brundle's input on this, and we can ask him when he's next back in here again, or perhaps what he might have done in this race, what he would have expected to do to teams and level he's driven at, given that he was a class winner for Aston Martin in this very race this time last year. Well, not quite this time last year, but this race last year. In all honesty, what would you change? I would say as little as possible. If the car was working fine, only change anything that you thought was a problem.
You've been around historic racing far too long. You have been around historic racing.
What's that got to do with historic racing?
I change everything.
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because
No. Complete opposite. Completely disagree. If it's running fine, leave it alone. No, hang on. You started the race with it like that. You expected to finish it as it is. That number 1 Audi Sport is changing its gearbox for a very good reason. That tells us quite a lot. They're not doing that precautionary.
Right.
They are not doing that for a precaution.
You think there's an issue?
Absolutely. That car was not going to get to the end of that race with that gearbox. They haven't done it. Why risk upsetting so much all those unions that you undo that then could possibly not get tightened up, pinched, cross-threaded, something? I know I'm talking old school type things, but most of it still is. It's still mechanical. Why risk upsetting such a major component as a gearbox, which has your rear suspension attached, your brakes, brake lines, all the union lines, all the oil lines to it, and it all of a sudden going out, and 2 minutes later it goes and breaks again? What's the point? Change it only if you need to. Leave it well alone. I get quite correctly a geometry check. Yeah, corner weight, run a bit of string around it, absolutely fine. Why not? You wouldn't do.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do?
Yeah.
Perfect opportunity. That's just setup. That's fine tuning. That's just common sense.
Yeah.
You've got the chance. You wouldn't have that in a race normally. Why not have maximum advantage? As for major components, you don't change a gearbox for the sake of it. You don't think, well, do you know what? We'll pop the heads off and do a decoke while we're here, shall we? We've got a few hours until dawn. I'm joking, but you get my point, is it?
Yeah, I do, absolutely.
Probably most of our listeners don't know what a decoke is anyway.
And it probably don't.
I'm showing my age again now,
I'm not sure that today's fuel standard of octane fuel actually causes
I can imagine Alex is sitting there going, what's a decoke?
Yeah, no, we've had that conversation.
Is that a Coke with no sugar in it?
Darren Wood is suggesting that the number 9 and the number 4 Mercedes that we've lost from this race are regretting pulling their cars out, given that they might now have several hours to repair the cars. Yes, they would be laps down, but they would have virtually new cars. Now, I'm suggesting to Darren he needs to ring our good friend Adam Christodoulou and find out the answer to that, and see if Adam can sprint back from his hotel, which I'm sure he's gone back to. Well, no, Adam, he's probably still hanging around the pits. I wonder if there is a chance. I think they've made the decision. The car's been put into the recovery car park, and that decision is that the car's been put
into the recovery position.
He put in the recovery and resuscitated.
It's not that poorly, is it?
That's what Darren's wanting. He wants the cars resuscitated. Try saying that at 4 a.m. It's not even 4 a.m. yet.
Take your time. Don't peak early. We could be here for a while.
So, just looking back to our collective and getting their thoughts on the race so far. Keep them coming. Hashtag N24 RSL, and we'll see if you've got any queries, any questions you'd like to ask Snowy. All right. We've confirmed it was the GT Golf that changed the engine last year. And then I think they had the car running by Sunday morning. Brand new gearbox noticed by Alan Prosser.
Just a quick, while you're just going through that, getting the tweets there, just a quick recap on the start of the race here. We've got a little bit of highlights there for those of you who are listening as well. That what we have got before the red flag came out, we had an extraordinary start with the Ferrari that was in second place on the front row there, but getting ahead of the Mauro Engel GT3 Mercedes on the outlap. Literally first couple of corners go there. Then absolutely nailed by the number 9 Mercedes, the Get Speed car. Managed to get through, going on to the Hatzenbach, going on to literally onto the Nordschleife. That was then followed really quite quickly by Mauro Engel that had lost that pole position to the Octane Ferrari at the beginning, and that's literally turn 1, turn 2 of the race. Literally, I don't just mean turns 1 and 2 of the GP circuit, I mean the first turns of the race. Bearing in mind it's a 24-hour race, and they were already straight up to it. We lost the number 100 Rover BMW a little bit earlier on, unfortunately. That was somewhat badly damaged, swapped ends and collected so it was the Valkenhorst car, wasn't it? Sorry, it was the Valkenhorst one, not the Rover one. The Lamborghini also went out with the Franz Conrad run car with an oil issue. That was an early retirement.
Yeah, and certainly the cause of the earlier oil slick. I just want to clarify something for our listeners who may be looking in on timing and scoring as well. And the timing and scoring is showing the green bar, which indicates a green flag racetrack. That's not quite what that means. That is the green flag denotes that the track is clear and has no obstructions, and the track is clear to go racing. However, we are under red flag conditions, and we will remain under red flag conditions until midnight 30 hours German time, 11 or 23:30 hours in the UK. So we're a little bit off an update with regarding track conditions and weather. And if you are just watching from the timing screen, I know it's showing green, but that's not quite what it means. It just means that the track is clear and ready to go racing. However, it's not factoring in that track conditions have been deemed by the race organisers and race stewards that it is unsafe. So we're still halted, and we're going to be under red flag conditions until at least 23:30 hours. We're getting to that point in the race where we're about to have a changeover in this seat, and Johnny Palmer's going to be taking over from me in a moment. Just gives me an opportunity to engage with a few more of the listeners. Rob Chalmers, a bit of insight as to the Audi R8 LMS gearbox fitting, 6-bolt fixing, not quite a zip Snowy, but a 6-bolt fixing for the inner CV joints on the drive shafts. Pretty much like most VAG road cars, it means that the gearbox is sealed and pre-filled, and they don't have to faff about with the draining and filling aspect of lubricating the gearbox. So with
great information, that. So,
yeah, it is a bit of insight there. Thanks, Rob. I was about to give you a bit of a rundown of the classes and a bit of an update on the Glickenhaus to our listener who's asked for an update on that car. That's going to come out as the first of the non-SP9 runners. It's running in the SPX class. It's very much been balanced to run to GT3 specification, which is pretty much the SP9, but because it doesn't meet the homologation factors that are within the GT3 SP9 kind of classification, then it runs in SPX. So it's a class leader, down in 17th place overall, just off the about a lap down off the car ahead of it. So the Glickenhaus there, 17th overall. The next class in the order is in 26th place overall. That's the Volkenhorst Motorsport BMW M4 GT4. That's in the SP8T class. And then looking at the order just behind that, just off the same lap, is the first of our TCR runners. It's the Honda Civic TCR runner, down in 27th overall. SP10 is 28th overall. That's the Hofer Racing by Bonk Motorsport BMW M4. 29th overall is car 306. That's first in the Cup 3 class, and that's the Black Falcon Team Techstar Porsche Cayman. That's the Porsche Cayman 982 GT4. First in the SP7 class is 30th overall. So quite a mix of classes there from 26th place down over. So first in SP7 is the W&S Motorsport Porsche Cayman, car 58. Cup 3 is, sorry, we've already done Cup 3. It is the Klauser Cup 5 entry of Team Avia Sorg Rennsport BMW M240i. That is in 33rd spot overall. Down in 36th is the number 111, and that's the Cup X. That's the Teichmann Racing KTM Crossbow, or Expo. And then now looking at SP Pro, first in class Black Falcon Team Identica, the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup, running in SP Pro, currently in 42nd place overall. We then have to go down to 48th for the class leader of the V3T class, and that is the Team Matol Racing Porsche 718 Cayman. And then just behind it is the V2T class leader in 49th spot overall. It's the Pixum CFN Team Adrenaline BMW 330. Behind them on the road in 50th is the SP3T class leader. That's the Engstler Motorsport Hyundai i30 Fastback, currently in 50th. And then the V6 class is in, the leader of the V6 class, I should say, is in 53rd spot overall. That's the Pixum CFN Team Adrenaline Porsche Cayman. SP8 is in 54th spot overall, and that's Novel Racing with Toyo tyres. That's the Lexus in 54th spot overall. Car 54 in 54th spot. That's rather a nice synergy, isn't it? We've got the Porsche Cayman 718 in the SP4T class, leading the SP4T class in 56th spot. That's car 86, and that's, I believe, Peter Kate at the wheel. We know Peter from Aston Martin. This year, of course, no Aston Martins in the field, and Peter find himself a Porsche Cayman 718 GTS to run in SP4T. We have to go further down the order to 62nd spot to find the AT class leader. That's the Four Motors Bio Concept car, the Porsche Cayman GT4, running on bioethanol fuel. And then in 65th spot, it's the leader of V4. That's the Rent-A-Drive Familia Racing BMW 325i. And that leaves us about two more class leaders. Tom Coronel, I think that's Tom Coronel in the BMW M2 of Pixum CFN Team Adrenaline. And that's car 36 in 73rd spot. In 74th spot is the SP3 class leader of Toyota Gazoo Racing Team Thailand. That's the Toyota Corolla Altis car 120. And I think we've got one more class leader to tell you about, and that's down in 87th spot. It's the leader of SP4. It's the Scuderia Solagan BMW 325i, and that is currently 87th. But I think I've already said that. So that's our class rundown. We're still under red flag conditions, and I'm now going to hand you over to Johnny Palmer while Snowy tells us another wet weather story, maybe.
Not just yet. We've got a slight update on the number 1 Audi, the Phoenix sport car sitting in there that's having a gearbox change. That it is a precautionary gearbox change, but there was apparently a missed shift showing on the software on the data recording. So it is precautionary. There's nothing particularly wrong with it, but it is showing a missed shift. Therefore, when they've got the opportunity, obviously during the race, they'd had to carry it on and just fingers crossed and hope that would have carried on. But as it's showing that, then change the gearbox while they can. They've got the opportunity, so why wouldn't you take it? So there is a reason for that gearbox change on the number 1 Audi. So we're going to get the next update in just under an hour's time from us. Joe couldn't really work out which time that was in terms of whether it was CET or whether it was GMT or British Summer Time or Australian time or something, but basically it was 90 minutes away. We knew that anyway.
And have you remembered when he said that? Because if the clock's ticking, it's we're about 15 minutes, half an hour on, or it could be back in time for all Joe knows.
It's 11:30 midnight German time, 11:30 English time. It's simple. It's really quite simple.
Yeah, when you put it like that, definitely. And yeah, confirmation around the world as well that we're getting in the next information. That's not necessarily a race start, of course. It's just the next bulletin, the next radio message, quite possibly from race control to the teams. But umbrellas and other coverings definitely order the day up and down pit road. Plenty of team mechanics and strategists heading either into the garages or to the Pratt perches that sit on the pit wall. And thankfully, they're all sort of sealed with bits of plastic, and that you can apply the zippers to make sure that none of those leak. Because, of course, laptops and weather radar systems mixing with rain, never ideal. And there'll be eyes trained on the radar. I mean, I've seen a picture. One of our listeners, I think, pinged it Joe's way and to @RSL_studio saying the weather doesn't look brilliant, I have to say, for the next 6 hours or so. There's a yellowy red patch of just horrible weather sitting over this part of Germany.
Well, I've been vilified for saying that. Apparently.
Oh, really?
All Snowy's fault for saying it on my app on a basic iPhone. Apparently, I did point out it was Alan Gow's app, or vindicated, accredited by Alan Gow that he uses it. Alan Hines is going to thank me for that one, because I'm not supposed to have that. But there you go, that's another story.
Oops.
Oh, it's out there now. It's public and it's running around. But yeah, it is an app that Mr. Gow has used. And the point behind that is that he has apparently gone through a whole raft of these apps to find the one that he finds the most accurate. So there is some credibility to it. All I said was that according to the facts I'm reading, it's going to be until around about 5 o'clock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock local time before the rain eases back to something around about 15% precipitation.
Well, I'm going to
99%.
I'm going to blame Zach Anderson, who is at Clemson Zach, who, as I said, tweeted to @Bradders3078, @RSL_studio, @Specutainment. Interestingly, left me out, but thanks, Zach, for that. @Blackpool Johnny I am for the next time you do that. I'm no expert, he says, but not looking great on the radar for starting the race anytime soon. And the picture I saw was a screenshot from his phone, I assume. And yes, this part of West Germany, around Cologne and a little bit south, obviously, to the racetrack, but way up towards the border with the Netherlands as well, is just a sort of steady patch of rain, which is whistling through because the wind's strong and has been for the last few days. So, I mean, I'm hopeful for the next weather system to arrive and this current one to leave, but I think it's just going to bring more wet weather, and that's precisely what race control think right now, because they're not going to offer another update, excuse me, for about 50 minutes. Yes. So we are now at 20 to midnight. Always love cars going round as we go from one day into another, but sadly we won't be able to enjoy that at the Nurburgring this year, and it'll be 12:30 at the earliest before we get an update. It does, though, give obviously teams opportunity to do either essential work or work that they would prefer to get out of the way before we go for a race start. And obviously I was just coming back again to replace Joe, and hearing you guys talking about an Audi that's getting a significant...
Yeah, the number one car, and actually also the P1 car in the race, the Phoenix car that was having a gearbox change, and Joe was asking me what would you think of changing in these sort of conditions. We saw a car having a bit of string run around it, did the corner weights. That's logical. It's been out there. It's had some action. It's been over curves, whatever. Why wouldn't you take the opportunity to put the car into its absolute tip-top specification? A gearbox change slightly surprised me. My view was that you would, and it is my personal view, but my view was that you would, obviously not the teams, because I'm not in the team. None of us are, so we are guessing. But my view was, why would you change anything so fundamental unless you had to, or there was a valid reason to do that? In this case, why upset something as obvious as a gearbox, particularly on that Audi? It's on the back of the car, it's a transaxle. You're taking the rear suspension off, brake lines, you're disturbing lots of other things around that unit to replace it. So my thinking was there would probably be a reason for that. Now, I did say quite openly that I thought, okay, if that's got a problem with it, it probably wouldn't finish the race. Now, it didn't have that. We've had some information there to say that they had a missed shift on the data, but there was nothing particularly wrong with the gearbox. So it is quite right. There's a legitimate reason. It is a precautionary gearbox change because they're leading the race. They're so many hours in. Why wouldn't you take that chance of, it's got this, it's a glitch. They have the opportunity they wouldn't normally have. So the red flag situation has presented that opportunity, that window to say, do you know what, we've got this. We're not really sure what it's about. The driver's reported nothing. Hasn't affected the times or the performance, but it's there. It's that glitch. It's a blip on the graph, however you want to look at it, and it's there. Is that the portent of something future or not? Whatever. And this is always the problem that engineers and drivers and teams have got. It's something there that ordinarily, I imagine, if the race had carried on, you'd probably just turn a blind eye to it because you don't want to think about it because we're leading and we're going to stay leading. Let's just, if we don't talk about it, it's not there, kind of thing. It is there, and they've got this opportunity, so why wouldn't you take advantage of it and change the gearbox?
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they've done.
Because you would regret it if you didn't take this opportunity, and also, you know,
exactly.
Race Control have put a firm stamp on it being 90 minutes. So I think that was then where they suddenly thought Audi teams, the Audi car number one for Phoenix, thought, right, let's do the gearbox change now. We've got an hour and a half. We should be able to get some way through it. And looking at the radar, even though we are going to get another announcement at 12:30, it's unlikely that will be form up on the grid for a race restart, because I think the rain is set in now for a good few hours. But Race Control don't want to commit too far ahead. We have had these stages of reporting. I mean, for example, covering the Dubai 24 hours way back at the start of the year, and what was that, the second weekend of January, and we had, first of all, a steady wave of reporting every 30 minutes. That then extended to about every 2 hours. And then the next update was going to be in 5 hours, I think it was, just because they realised this rain was not going to stop. And sadly, that race never restarted. It only ran to just over 7 hours, which was supposed to be a 24-hour race of Dubai. I think there's plenty of opportunity to race again here at the Nurburgring, but we are set in for a pretty lengthy red flag, I reckon.
Do you think if you have a 24-hour race and you pay your entry fee and you only get 7 hours, do you think there's a refund? I suspect not.
Having chatted to one or two of the teams, that was a firm no, and it was declared as a full result as well. But it's worth asking the question, isn't it?
I bet there were quite a few team managers and certainly team bankers who thought, oh, some of the people that bankrolled and go, oh, hang on a minute, I haven't had my money's worth there. Can we get a refund or a credit?
Nikolai B on Twitter, tweeting to @RSL_studio, reminds me, or asks the question, which has reminded me, didn't a number 1 Audi go off at Adenauer Forst early on, shortly after the number 9 AMG? I seem to remember that dark green car, probably in the opening couple of stints, was Fred Vervisch at the wheel, and he found the grass at Adenauer Forst. So shortly after the number 9 AMG. Now, that maybe places it later on in the race when Raffaele Marciello had its difficulty with a loose wheel or whatever it may have been. We'll get news, hopefully, in due course from Get Speed about exactly what the drama was to take the number 9 car out. But could be a factor in changing the gearbox as a precaution to any damage sustained in that impact to the rear. But it's actually, and Audi have said this, due to this mischange or
a mischief.
Thank you.
A logged mischief, a recorded mischief
on the computer. Yeah. Well, I fully respect Audi's decision to crack on with that work, And I just wonder whether one or two other teams may be taking this opportunity. Red flag allows you to perform maintenance that you wouldn't normally be able to do in a race, this extended stop. And I mean, part ferme conditions clearly not being adopted for a red flag. There never are. Unlike, you know, how you would get to how we did have last night between the two qualifying sessions. All you could do was fuel the car and change the driver. The clock's still running, by the way. The clock always continues to run in a 24-hour race. So the time at the end for the race winner will still display 24 hours. It's just that we won't have been racing for X amount of hours in the middle. That makes it difficult when I'm trying to track back to work out when the last red flag in this race was historically, because you don't get the answer from how long they were racing, because it displays 24 hours whatever. I remind you, by the way, if you're tuning in to timing and scoring around the world, you might be presented with a timing screen with a green band at the top, which suggests we are racing. That's just a quirk of the system. And Viga are the timekeepers for this event. They don't have the capability of beaming out a red flag constantly. I think it was inserted manually for the first half an hour or so, and it's now reverted back to green. But I can assure you there are no cars going around. And those that have downloaded the GPS Auga tracker, which works on an Apple iPad, can see that there are no cars circulating, sadly. But I can see a cleared track, so everybody's got back safely after the red flag was first thrown.
Interestingly, the Rover racing BMW M6 has just been brought out into the pit lane, and why you'd bring that car out in the pouring rain on its dollies with no wheels on, as if it was about to sort of pre-race before they do the what, that just slightly surprises me. Why you'd push a perfectly serviceable racing car out into the pit unless need to put fuel in it?
I think that's
probably as simple as that. I actually never thought about that. Probably just to fuel it. They are running it up by the look of it, because it's got its lights on full ablaze now. So perhaps that's another reason that they might need to put some fuel in it, not in the garage. Exactly. And also, it looks like it's got its headlights. Well, it has got its headlights on, so I'm guessing they're running it. Maybe they'd have to do something to put a heat cycle through it, and obviously wouldn't be starting that inside the garage. So thought process did work there. I just initially saw it and thought, why would you push a perfectly clean, serviceable motor car out into the rain?
Yeah, well, it is bucketing it down, but that is the only safe place to refuel. Number of other comments coming in on Twitter. I mean, this is where we're really using you guys who are joining us for the night stint. Delighted that you can be, and let's drum up some conversation, folks, at RSL_studio. How did the official decide if the surface is okay to race on again? Marshall reports, poses Matt Edwards on Twitter. Do they send a course car around? Well, yeah, all of those things. And Marshall stay on post, the brave guys and girls in orange. They'll be doing it in shifts anyway from a safety perspective, just like the drivers. You know, the marshals need to sleep too, so it'll be, I'm not sure how, you know, hours of length of a stint, but there will be some time at least for them to get their heads down, and hopefully they park their cars relatively nearby as well, so it's not too much of a run through the pouring rain, and hopefully some of those posts offer a little bit of shelter as well. The difficult thing at the moment in this modern climate is that marshalling has to be done also adopting COVID-19 protocol. Although I suppose if you've been in a sort of marshal bubble for the last few days, then maybe everybody on that post can mix, but still trying to adhere by the 2 metre distance where possible. But yes, it'll be observer reports being sent back on the radio to the clerk of the course. They'll definitely send a course car around as well. But if there's just too much standing water visually, there's no chance of this restarting. I mean, one thing that clears the water from the road surface, it's actually race cars going round. But you've got to be brave enough to, first of all, you would think, start the race again behind a safety car. And then the safety car driver and his the guy alongside can beam back more reports too. And I mean, I've seen races sometimes which start again behind the safety car and then they red flag it after a few laps because it's just too dangerous.
It's a bold move for anybody, and it's an expensive way of clearing the racetrack, and also a potentially quite a dangerous one.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. You know, once you've stopped it, if anything, the decision to stop is probably harder than the decision to restart, and I'll explain what I think about what I mean by that. It takes a while, it's getting wet, drivers have a few incidents, whatever, okay, let's stop it. When to restart is, why would you then send cars back? How much of a percentage better or improved does it have to be from when you stopped it? Because that's what you're going to be, because you're looking at effectively risk assessment, liability. You're talking a safety issue. It's been stopped on safety grounds, simple as that. Standing water, cars go off. Motor racing's, it's a pretty punchy end business doing the best.
Yeah, inherently dangerous. That's kind of why we love it, isn't it?
It's like skydiving. As pilots always tell you, that people that parachutists, why would you jump out of a perfectly serviceable airplane? They don't get it. Yeah, so good pilots just don't get it. Why would you do that? Why would you leave it? Why would you vacate it? Why would you drive a racing car around the track in the first place? Well, we do. It's a 24-hour race. That's what we're doing. The point to stop it is the standing water, cars can be pulled. You're not actually racing. You're not putting a race on when it's that dangerous, because you're just avoiding it. It is just literally keeping it out of the barriers. And we're not just talking a few percent slower or whatever, a bit careful. We're getting to the point where it's difficult to physically drive the car. Where is the point? Because the risk-benefit ratio goes up in terms of damage, possibly hurting somebody or other people, marshals or whatever. Highly unlikely, but we can't do that. We can't run that. So the restart is, when do you restart? When do the organisers, and I don't wish this upon them at all, when do you restart? Because if you stop it under rain of this level, and that level continues for the next half hour, and half hour again, and as you said in Dubai, the next 2 hours, you start thinking, we've only got so much time left on the clock, no pun intended, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, given that also you're going to start under, if you restart sooner rather than later. We've mentioned we're later in the year, we're in autumn now, we've got a much longer period of darkness, a good 12 hours. Normally we're talking, what, 7-8 hours of darkness, roughly?
Maybe not that few, but 9.
9, okay.
Yeah, 9, 10.
8 to 10, let's call it roughly something along those lines. That's definitely 12 hours. So half this race should take part under the darkness in the sky, and then rain. So why would you restart it in that? And I wouldn't surprise me at all. And this is just my personal opinion. I'm not speculating. It wouldn't at all surprise me from an organisational point of view if we didn't see a restart until somewhere light. You never know. It could be daylight. It could be dawn before we say, actually, now it's cleared up. That is also ties in a part of my reasoning, and that thinking is, and I am just guessing, I'm putting a few bits together, trying to create a perfect non-storm, if that makes any sense. No, actually putting in the weather. To say, that's when the forecast tells us it's going to ease off considerably down to 15% chance of rain. The daylight's going to come back. So basically, a lot of the permutations are on our side. A lot of the danger is taken away, and hopefully we can do that. I am simply just putting in my humble opinion of what I think might happen. From an organiser's point of view, I wouldn't want to be sitting in there now having to make this decision.
No, and the thing is, they're also projecting forward by a couple of hours, because, I mean, it's no good thinking, well, it's stopping now, and you know full well there's another band of weather coming in, and that's going to affect the next 3 hours. So you've got to think a little bit fourth dimensionally. Where are we going to be in the next hour to 2 hours? And is it really worth having to go at this? But if they spot a clearance in the weather, then I think it will be worth sending a safety car out with all of the cars behind it. But then there's another massive question mark as to when do you withdraw the safety car, and sometimes you've got to leave the drivers out there on their own to see how they cope, but we're a long way off that at the moment. Also, a little question from, there was a question about the Renault Clio from JJ, tweeting to @RSL_studio. Any update on the car that must be one of the lowest powered cars in the event? Well, yes, you're quite right. The Renault Clio, which is car number 123, and that has had its difficulties through the course of the race, and it is sadly about 3 from the back currently, but is crucially still running. So there is scope yet for its position to improve, and we'll keep clearly some tabs on that car number 123 through the course of the race. We're trying to cover as many different classes as possible because there's 23 of them in the field, and it's only right, I think, that if you've turned up brave enough to put an entry into the race, that you warrant a number of mentions through the 24 hours.
Quick question for you, Johnny. We're just following on the Twitter there. Jordan Hines has tweeted, as you say, @RSL_studio to yourself and himself. If you could build your dream Nurburgring 24-hour team, what GT3 car would you pick, and who would be in your driver lineup?
Just repeat that question for me once again. I got most of it.
From Jordan Hines. So I'll say it slower, shall I?
Yeah, please.
If you
it's late at night.
You just had a break, you see. You're back on what to speed yet, are you? Yeah, okay. If you could build your dream Nurburgring 24-hour team, what GT3 car would you pick? And who would be in your driver lineup?
Oh, man, that's tough.
If you're talking right now, I'll tell you what, I'm going to split this. We're going to do this between us, okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to pick the car because that's the easy cop-out, okay?
All right.
AMG Mercedes.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine.
Now you pick the 4 drivers.
Fine. Maro Engel, straight away.
See what I did there? Made it easy.
Yeah, very good. I mean, to be honest.
Yeah, and by the way, just to make it fair, Johnny, and only fair to Jordan's very valid question there, Jordan Hines, thank you very much for the Mercedes GT3.
Oh.
It's your team.
Interesting.
That's only fair to Jordan, I think. That's the question he's asking. What would we pick in the commentary booth? I've picked that car.
So you picked the Mercedes?
Let me see. I've got to think about those 488 Ferraris, haven't I?
You have.
So,
and do we need to think about what's quick this weekend, or is it just purely your dream car and it's going to be amazing?
I think Jordan's asking a very fair question. I think let's not overdo this one, can't. So let's stick with it. AMG, Mercedes. So
it can't be a Mercedes driver. I put.
Well, no, it can, no. I'm just saying you can't just pick out. You can't just go to the entry list, pick out 4 Mercedes drivers.
Gotcha.
Got a bit more effort into that, Johnny.
All right, fine. I will put.
Use a little Grisels.
I would put Christopher Mies in it. He doesn't drive a Mercedes, but I think he could be very good in that. Fabian Schiller, all right. For me, Matt Campbell, Porsche driver.
How about Luca Ludwig?
Okay, the star of qualifying late last night.
Albeit in a Ferrari, but what not he'd be like in a Mercedes?
Well, his dad could drive anything, so...
Precisely. You know, I'm thinking, what's in the genes? What's in the genes? Precisely my point. What's in the genes? Yeah. Or,
I like it.
Old-timer, bring out Franz Conrad. He's won this race before.
You could.
Never mind that Italian thing that breaks and spins on its own oil.
Yeah.
No, that's a bit mean, but... Okay, but you know what I mean.
It was fast
little
before
bit
it broke.
tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, I'm sure next time Franz sees me, he'll just say, I heard you. I hear you. Yes. And call me something, I'm sure. I did live in his fair country for a while, so he does understand. That's fine. He has caught me a few things in German in the past, but we won't broadcast those. But that would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And no, I like that because it's almost like a fantasy football methodology, but applying it to race cars. You pick a car, you pick your 4-driver lineup, and we know the track. So you're picking.
So how about this old-timer one, as in Nurburgring old-timer, the classic. Put Klaus Ludwig, Winkelhock, Conrad. Who else can we pick? Put in a modern GT3 Mercedes and see what they did. Imagine that.
Well,
fourth driver from that era.
Go on.
Stuck.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Say, Stuck. Hans Stuck.
Hans Stuck straight away.
What a lineup. And I bet they would still surprise you.
They probably would. Yeah. I mean, you would stick back and go, well, these guys
surprise themselves
can probably drive anything, but it's that mixture of eras, isn't it? Those guys that didn't have the chance to compete in GT3, but you could equally switch it the other way, and the modern-day GT3 driver in the old-school machinery.
Smoking Joe Winkelhock in an AMG GT3.
There you go. Well, we've got Marcus Winkelhock in the race.
Exactly. So, I'm sure he's still got a BMW contract in his pocket, but he wouldn't be allowed to drive a Mercedes.
No.
Knowing Smoking Joe.
Indeed so. And yeah, his nephew firmly in the Audi camp as well. But great that is. I mean, if you've got any ideas, picking a car, a modern-day GT3 car, and then your own 4-driver lineup, by all means, tweet them to us at RSL_studio, as we are under a red flag for the 2020 edition of the Nurburgring 24 Hours. We are told we'll get further information in just over half an hour's time. It is very nearly a minute to midnight now in this part of the Eifel region. And sadly, the typical Eifel mountain weather has struck. It was kind of looking a little bit iffy on the forecast about a week out, actually. And we did okay early Thursday with dry sessions initially, but the rain had its say then on Friday throughout the day. And it's really hit with menace for the 24 hours of the Nürburgring. But I'm sure there's more racing in store. We're celebrating 50 years, remember, of this fabulous event, and taking your questions and interactivity on Twitter at RSL_studio for anything else you'd like to add into the pot as we continue to discuss.
Well, I will add into the pot and continue to discuss exactly that. The question that Jordan Hines initiated here with the if you could build your dream Nurburgring 24-hour team, what GT3 car would you pick, and who would you be in your drive? So who would be in your driver lineup? A couple of answers already, but 2 already have said immediately that Dragonfire has said, well, that's easy. Manthey Racing, it already exists. And indeed, Gert van Kamp has said exactly the same. The Manthey Racing team from 2018, the car was the most beautiful, and that lineup was just the best. So a popular vote there for Manthey. So that knocks our old-timer version out of the window, out of the ballpark straight away, doesn't it?
They're talking about the 912 Grello car, which was driven 2 years ago by Richard Leitz, not here this weekend because of the outbreak of coronavirus within the Porsche camp. Patrick Pilet, who was racing, he got a really last-minute call to race for EDEX Sport in the LMP2 category last weekend because of while Dwight Merriman was told by the doctor that he was unable to race, so Patrick Pilet was a very late substitute there. Fred Makovici joined the lineup in the 912, and Nick Tandy, who was also at the wheel of an LMP2 car 7 days ago. So that's pretty impressive lineup. Leitz, Pilet, Makovici, Tandy taking victory in 2018. When there was a red flag, and thanks for the reminder on this. Now, who was that a moment or 2 ago? Last red flag, Big Norm, thank you for this. Last red flag was 18 at about 6 a.m. Sunday morning. I remember that because there were a number of hours when it really looked a bit iffy as to whether the race would restart or not. We were in the Aston Martin Lounge broadcasting live on the Radio Show Limited network of channels. Aston were in a cracking position at the time. They might have even been leading the race or second on the road when the red flag came out. And obviously all those at Aston desperate for the race to be called. And in the end, I think we had about 90 minutes, maybe just over that, to the flag. And it was really tricky, but the Porsche came through to take the victory in the Grello colours, the green and the yellow. Thank you to Sarah Rigby, who is a massive Aston Martin fan, as listeners to RS1 will know. And she's picked up on a tweet from Peter Kate, one of the drivers not in an Aston this year, although we do have at least, I think it's 2 Aston Martins in the field this year in the SP8T category, but Peter not in that car. But he has said he's reported the red flag at Peter Kate Racer and then said expect restart with daylight. So that's actually what Snowy was saying, suggesting it's going to be safer and more of a prospect of restarting the race when the rain has fully disappeared. Meteo Motorsport, who look after the weather at the Nürburgring, I think it's the same organisation. Anyway, irrespective of that.
You say look after the weather, as in they organise it, or look after the weather reporting?
Look after the weather reporting, is what I meant to say.
The key operational word in that sentence.
If only they did look after the weather. Because we could ring them up and say, what's all this about? We want to see some motor racing, for goodness sake. They look after potentially what's going to be around the corner, and they say heavy rain expected to continue through the night at the Nürburgring. Not your surprised face, Peter Snowden.
No, not at all. And as I said, it's my personal opinion. I just thought I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't restart. It wouldn't surprise me if the organisers, because of the forecast, heavy rain throughout the night, and then daylight obviously coming around at that appropriate time, they said that's a good time to start the race. I'm not saying it's going to. I've got no basis of that other than it just wouldn't surprise me if that were to be the case, largely because of it's forecast not to change throughout the night. They've stopped it already, so the conditions haven't changed. Why would you? Why would you restart it back in the same conditions you stopped it? Yeah, makes no sense.
No, agreed.
Something's got to change.
Hearing from Brad Kettler, massive experience in running race cars. Record time for doing the Audi R8 rear end change was 3 minutes 8 seconds. So they don't need 90 minutes. Joe just buzzing that to me. And obviously had been messaged by Brad. So, 90 minutes, should be able to do it a doddle in that period of time. And also Alexander Sims, who is one of the BMW racers this weekend for Rover. And he has also made the point that there's that much surface water, or there was before the red flag, that is all it's doing is throwing it up into the air and creating quite a low fog now in the lower parts of the track in the valley, which is typical really of the Nordschleife. The water, yes, okay, it's churned up from the road surface through those massive rear tyres on the GT3 cars and up into the air, but it just sort of floats and hangs around the valley, and visibility is one of the biggest problems, along with the lack of grip on the road surface. So something to bear in mind as well. The marshals will actually be testing whether from their post they can see the next post for the marshals, and they can do that with flags, they can do that with torches as well. But if you can't see from one post to the next, for the marshals' point of view, because they're looking to the next one going, is there a yellow flag? Is there a yellow flag being waved there, or double wave yellows? Because that means I've got to be waving a yellow. If they can't even see the next post, then what hope have the drivers got?
Absolutely. Putting basically a road car, and what we're going to do is we're going to take it to the Nurburgring, and we're going to see how it gets on. It won its class.
Wow.
Straight out. What do they name it?
Go on.
The N24.
Aha!
That's now called an Aston Martin GT4, but originally when it first came out in 2007-8, you bought it as an Aston Martin N24. Yes, I know, because I raced it when it first came out.
Oh,
but
brilliant.
That's
Yeah,
exactly one of those. But that's my point. It was a customer car, and there was absolutely the proof in the pudding that a customer sponsor of mine at the time said, whilst I was doing GT3 racing and he was sponsoring that, are these any good? And I thought, oh, I get to drive a GT4 car as well, and it's got an Aston badge on the front, marvellous. So I get to race and do both. And but that's the point. It encouraged people like that, wealthy businessmen who could afford to go and do it, always been the mainstay of racing. And some of the top drivers in this category are still gentlemen drivers that can more than hold their own. We're not just talking, it's all not always full of Fabian Schillers, Van Toors and Ludwigs, etc. But also those that slightly lesser down the order want to, they can take part and do British GT, European GT, NLS, N24. They can buy an Aston Martin or a Porsche or any other brands, other makes are available as well. I'm just focusing on the one that's pretty obvious because we're British. We're talking about it, but it's a way of getting into the racing in a GT4 car that isn't horrifically expensive to go racing. It's still never going to be cheap to go GT4 racing.
No, well, it kind of never was going to be.
It's not quite the way GT3 is, put it that way.
True enough, that's a massive step up as well. We thought we'd have to wait until 12:30 for the next update. In fact, it has arrived now, and we are not going to get a further update until local time 7 a.m, I'm afraid to say. So that is just about that until daylight. Peter Cate's tweet was bang on, and it means that we will, well, we're not guaranteed to be racing by 7, but we will get information from race control. A reminder of how the cars sit then under this lengthy red flag. The number 1 Audi is out front after 39 laps completed. It is then the 29 car of Kelvin van der Linde, both Audis out front. In fact, 3 Audi R8 LMSs locking out the top 3 positions, with Christopher Haase in 3rd place in car number 3. Alexander Sims, somebody we were hearing comments from a little bit a short time ago regarding the mist in the valleys at the moment. He is, or was, in the 99 Rover Racing BMW and 4th on the road ahead of Earl Bamber in the KCMG Porsche. Martin Tomczyk for the 42 BMW Schnitzer outfit in 6th, ahead of Kim Louis Schramm's Audi. Maro Engel still being displayed, of course, after he switched cars in the number 6 car for Auto Arena, 8th. Josh Burden for KCMG Porsche, 9th. And Maxime Martin for Fricadelli Racing in 10th position. So the plan is that we are going to close down our feed with, sadly, no racing to witness through the night time, and hope that this weather system will clear in time for the daylight hours. It will be further information at 7 a.m. and that is 7 a.m. Central European Summer Time, and fingers crossed that we can be racing either at that time or within the hour, just as soon as race control have assessed the track service. Thanks to all involved to this point. We were all set for an overnighter, as I'm sure you were too, but the weather's just not on our side, and I think the fact that it's being held later in the year has something to do with that. But be rest assured, we will be wide awake and ready to restart again at 7 a.m. local time. Alex Brundle, Nick Damon, Joe Bradley, Peter Snowden and myself, Johnny Palmer, and all involved with the production team as well. So keep well. Hope you enjoy a bit of sleep too, and we'll see you again in the daylight at the Nurburgring. From RS1, bye for now.
Well, that kind of sucks, but I plan to continue streaming. Hopefully they won't count the 7 hours against the total time of the race, but who knows. I mean, so far it's been a good race. There's been a couple good accidents or wrecks and things of that sort. Hopefully it'll continue to stay as good, with weather permitting, of course. It is kind of stupid that they flagged it, but I understand, seeing as Nürburgring is one of the most dangerous tracks in the world. They just want everybody to be safe. But I hope you all enjoyed watching it as much as I did. Hopefully I'll see you